qua 20 tháng 5, Tập đoàn Giáo dục Thụy Sĩ Swiss Education Group, gọi tắt là SEG, tổ chức hội thảo trực tuyến những nỗ lực của SEG trong năm 2020-2021, duy trì và bứt phá mạnh mẽ trong ngành quản lý nhà hàng và khách sạn. Đây là lĩnh vực được đánh giá là có chất lượng đào tạo tốt nhất thế giới tại đất nước Thụy Sĩ.
Phát biểu tại hội thảo, Tổng lãnh sự Thụy Sĩ tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, ông Martin Jusmeyer cho biết, Thụy Sĩ là nơi xây dựng chương trình quản trị nhà hàng. khách sạn chuyên nghiệp đầu tiên trên thế giới. Đất nước này cũng được biết đến là một quốc gia hòa bình và nhiều cảnh quan thiên nhiên tươi đẹp, được vinh danh là một trong những quốc gia hạnh phúc và sáng tạo nhất thế giới. Đây là nơi lý tưởng để học tập, khám phá nét đẹp con người và văn hóa.
With Vietnam's great international tourism potential after the pandemic, studying
Du lịch Việt Nam tiếp tục sở hữu tiềm năng lớn và nhiều cơ hội việc làm khi các tuyến du lịch quốc tế được phục hồi sau dịch. Do đó, việc theo học tại một trong những học viện hàng đầu về chuyên ngành quản lý khách sạn ở Thụy Sĩ, điển hình Swiss Education Group, sẽ giúp sinh viên Việt Nam cập nhật những kiến thức và kỹ năng quản lý khách sạn cần thiết, cũng như tư duy kinh doanh, góp phần đưa ngành du lịch Việt Nam lên một tầm cao mới. Đặc biệt, chất lượng giáo dục của Thụy Sĩ luôn đứng hàng đầu thế giới. Thành tích xuất sắc này có sự đóng góp rất lớn từ mô hình giáo dục thành công của Thụy Sĩ, điển hình như mô hình đào tạo về lĩnh vực nhà hàng khách sạn của Tập đoàn Giáo dục Thụy Sĩ. Ông Tarek Kausley, Giám đốc tiếp thị và phát triển của Tập đoàn Giáo dục Thụy Sĩ tại khu vực châu Á-Thái Bình Dương cho biết thêm, từ ngày 26 tháng 4, sinh viên đã được phép quay trở lại lớp để học trực tiếp cho giáo viên. Tuy nhiên, những tiện ích học tập trực tuyến vẫn được cung cấp cho các sinh viên chưa thể đến trường. Thụy Sĩ không yêu cầu cách ly đối với sinh viên đến từ Việt Nam. Hơn nữa, thông qua chiến dịch tiêm chủng rộng rãi, Thụy Sĩ đã bắt đầu tiêm chủng cho các cộng đồng sinh viên có nhu cầu. Đến nay, đã hơn 24.000 sinh viên đã tốt nghiệp từ hệ thống giáo dục chuyên ngành nhà hàng khách sạn của Tập đoàn Giáo dục Thụy Sĩ.
platform for our students that
Chúng tôi đã hình thành giao diện của giải pháp học tập trực tuyến VOA. Hệ thống này có sự tương tác cao để hỗ trợ cho sinh viên học tập một cách hiệu quả nhất. Chúng tôi có những nội dung tài liệu được thiết kế và tải lên đây dưới hình thức đa phương tiện để các em có thể tiếp cận. Hiện nay chúng tôi xây dựng và triển khai thành công app trên điện thoại di động. Chỉ cần sinh viên cài đặt trên điện thoại di động có thể theo dõi, tương tác với các bạn cùng lớp, giảng viên, nắm bắt được các chương trình, dự án bài tập. Với app này, sinh viên Việt Nam muốn theo học chương trình của SEG có thể đăng ký và học bằng hình thức trực tuyến.
Việt Nam, điểm đến ẩm thực hàng đầu châu Á do World Travel Awards lần thứ 26 trao giải. liên tục thu hút các nguồn đầu tư từ các doanh nghiệp, chuỗi kinh doanh trên toàn cầu. Nhưng do tác động từ đại dịch Covid-19, các doanh nghiệp F&B phải rơi vào trạng thái ngủ đông kéo dài, phải vật lộn để tồn tại. Nhằm định hướng và cung cấp công cụ giúp doanh nghiệp nhà hàng ẩm thực nắm lấy cơ hội, vượt thách thức, Asia Food and Beverage Summit 2021 được tổ chức cùng với Foodtracks và Food and Hotel Việt Nam FHV để giúp doanh nghiệp phát triển hệ sinh thái kinh doanh vững mạnh, áp dụng giải pháp vận hành xuất sắc theo định hướng phát triển bền vững, phục hồi mạnh mẽ hậu Covid-19 và thúc đẩy phát triển lên tầm cao mới. Đây là sự kiện dành riêng cho các chuyên gia và các cấp quản lý C-level trong ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực. Các hoạt động chính là những thảo luận chuyên sâu về cách giúp các doanh nghiệp F&B vượt qua khó khăn với tác động của Covid-19 bằng công cụ vận hành xuất sắc. Với các chủ đề đa dạng bao gồm tương lai của ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực Việt Nam, vận hành xuất sắc trong ngành nhà hàng và nhóm ngành dịch vụ, ứng dụng Lean trong ngành F&B, ứng dụng mô hình Six Sigma trong ngành F&B, thúc đẩy lợi nhuận gia tăng thông qua cá nhân hóa, đổi mới sáng tạo có giá trị trong ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực. Có sự tham dự của hơn 700 doanh nghiệp và nhà đầu tư cùng 30 chuyên gia hàng đầu ngành F&B Việt Nam và quốc tế. Cộng hưởng cùng hệ sinh thái triển lãm quốc tế Food and Hotel Việt Nam AFBS 2021 hứa hẹn sẽ mang đến một cơ hội kết nối và phát triển bền vững cho các doanh nghiệp kinh doanh F&B tại Việt Nam. Chương trình do Doanh nghiệp Xã hội Hiệp hội Nhà hàng Việt Nam RAV, Informa Markets, World Food Travel Association tổ chức. Đơn vị bảo trợ chuyên ngành Hiệp hội Văn hóa ẩm thực Việt Nam VCCA, phối hợp với John & Partners, The Lotus HQA, Terraverse, Phú Đạt Gia, Williams Business Agency. Hội nghị sẽ được diễn ra trực tuyến với hình thức Virtual Conference vào ngày 10 và 11 tháng 11 năm 2021. Thông tin chi tiết và đăng ký tham dự summit.rav.vn, fanpage chính thức sự kiện facebook.com/AFBS 2021. Vâng, chúng tôi xin được chào mừng tất cả các anh chị, quý khán giả đã quay trở lại với phiên chiều ngày cuối của Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc trong ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực AFBS 2021. Tôi là Quốc Khánh và rất vinh dự tiếp tục làm người dẫn dắt phiên chiều ngày hôm nay. Và trong phiên sáng vừa rồi thì chúng ta đã có nhiều thông tin rất là cụ thể, chi tiết và thiết thực về vận hành tinh gọn cũng như là thay đổi mô hình để giảm chi phí vận hành, những cái giải pháp để mà giành phần thắng trong cuộc chiến giao hàng, cũng như là cách thức tối ưu menu nhằm tối đa lợi nhuận và đổi mới sáng tạo trong ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực. Và trong phiên chiều ngày hôm nay, quý anh chị sẽ có thể tiếp tục giao lưu với các chuyên gia quốc tế qua các chủ đề như là xu hướng và cơ hội du lịch ẩm thực gần đây cho Việt Nam. Chúng ta sẽ thảo luận về phát triển tiềm năng du lịch ẩm thực Việt Nam trong giai đoạn mới, hay là nhận thức được xu hướng thực phẩm và đồ uống trên thế giới để đạt được sự tăng trưởng và hoạt động xuất sắc, cùng với các chủ đề thiết kế trải nghiệm khách hàng, thúc đẩy lợi nhuận gia tăng thông qua việc cá nhân hóa. Và không để quý vị chờ lâu, sau đây thì mời tất cả chúng ta cùng đến với phần chia sẻ đầu tiên trong phiên chiều ngày hôm nay từ ông Eric Wolf, là giám đốc điều hành của World Food Travel Association, đại diện đơn vị đồng tổ chức, sẽ chia sẻ về các xu hướng và cơ hội du lịch ẩm thực gần đây cho Việt Nam. I would like to welcome Mr. Eric Wolf, Executive Director from World Food Travel Association, WFTA, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Wolf, and I am the founder of the World Food Travel Association, and I'm also the executive director of the organization. And if you're not familiar with who we are, I founded the food travel industry about 20 years ago. And in the past 20 years, I've grown the industry as well as our organization from nothing. And we're very fortunate to be partners with the Restaurant Association of Vietnam. Mr. Min Chu is a certified ambassador of our association in Vietnam. If you are not that familiar with the World Food Travel Association, we are considered as the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. And it stands to reason that after 20 years, we would have achieved a lot. And in fact, we have 5 different product portfolios, things like our events, our consulting work that we do, the community platform that we offer, and of course, we are probably best known for our training and certification. We prepare different reports. We have our Taste of Place series reports, which are market intelligence. And every year we produce the State of the Food and Beverage Tourism Industry Report, which is a free download for our industry. The Taste of Place reports are also free resources for our industry. And before I get started today to tell you about the current trends taking place in the world and the opportunities for Vietnam, I would like to wish you all the best for a successful and healthy 2022. I know it's been a very hard time for everyone all around the world, but I am certain that by the end of next year, things will be back to normal and people will be traveling again. So we will keep our fingers crossed. And now let's talk about the recent gastronomy tourism trends and the opportunities for Vietnam. This is what we will discuss today. First of all, we're going to talk about food tourism and a very quick definition of it. I find that it is important to always define food tourism because many people have different ideas of what it is. And we have to be very clear because we want to make sure that we are talking about the same thing. Then we will look at changes in values, products, technology, and processes, and how they impact the food and beverage tourism industry. Now, in the report, you will see some data, and this data comes from our 2020 Food Travel Monitor report and the special COVID update that we published in July of 2020. Some of the data also comes from our 2021 State of the Food and Beverage Tourism Industry report. So let's talk about food tourism briefly. Here at the association, we define food tourism as the act of traveling for a taste of place in order to get a sense of place. And when we talk about food tourism, beverages are always included. The reason we don't call it culinary tourism or gastronomy tourism, which I believe you use in Vietnam, is because in English, both culinary and gastronomy sound very high end. They sound almost the elite. And to some English speakers, it sounds a little pretentious even. However, in other languages like Southeast Asia and in Southern Europe, they use gastronomy tourism. And that's fine because you know what you mean. But if you are speaking to Americans, you will probably want to call it food tourism. Now, if you're speaking to Canadians, you would want to call it culinary tourism because that is the term that they use there. In India, they use food tourism. And in Australia, they use food tourism as well as culinary tourism. I know it's complicated, but what this means, food tourism, is this pursuit of flavor, that we're all looking for that unique flavor, those unique experiences, those unique products. There are many definitions that are quite long and complicated, and it's usually governments or academics that make them very long. And we don't find that such long definitions are helpful. They overcomplicate things. So we like to keep things simple. And it's also important that you are able to repeat this definition when someone asks you, and you can't repeat 2 paragraphs of definition. Now, when we talk about food and drink, they're manifestations of culture, just like the national clothing, national music, architecture, the humor, the literature, art, all of these things are culture. But when you look at agriculture, which gives food and drink, the word culture is in agriculture. And food and drink are very much a manifestation of the local culture. Now, this represents a paradigm shift because sometimes people think food and drink are just that we just eat. It's something that we do anyway. And how could it be food? Because you know your own food. So why is it important and special? Well, we don't know your food, and that's why it is important and special. So we like to say here at the association that it's serving a memory and not a meal. And that's an important distinction. And that, I think, will help you to understand the difference between simply serving a plate of food because you're hungry and having a food or beverage experience that is uniquely Vietnamese. Now, when we talk about the food tourism industry, which also includes beverages, we break it down into something like this. So we have the food and beverage side, we have the travel and hospitality side, and we have those other businesses that don't really fit anywhere in the rest of the diagram. And food and beverage tourism is in the middle. It's when those food and beverage businesses and the travel and hospitality businesses and those other businesses come together. And by other businesses, we mean things like governments or academic researchers, the journalists who write about things like this, technology tools, and even the consumers themselves. So as you can see, there's about 20 different sectors that come to work together when we talk about food and beverage tourism. The industry is so large that it is almost impossible to give an accurate estimate of the economic impact. There are many reports out there that try to say that by 2022, the economic impact will be this. And those reports are extremely misleading. In the early days, we did come up with some data about the economic impact of food and beverage tourism, but then we realized we needed to revise the data and the figure tripled. And then over time, we realized, this is really very difficult to estimate because of all the sectors that are touched by this. And also the role of locals who go to restaurants that might be tourist restaurants, or tourists who go to grocery stores. That would be something that locals would do. There is so much crossover, it's very difficult to get a good idea. But it is safe to say that this industry is worth billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars each year. Food and beverage as a standalone product is one of the largest sectors in the world, as is travel and hospitality. So when you take two of the largest sectors in the world, you're going to have a very large economic impact. Now, to give you an idea of why food tourism is important, we look here at a commodity product like milk. And sometimes if you're in a country like France or Spain, we could look at a product like grapes, because grapes become wine. But here we're going to look at milk, and milk can become ice cream. But ultimately, those products are not things that drive big consumer spending. People don't come to a destination just to drink the milk. Well, some do. Some countries have great milk, like New Zealand, for instance. However, it is when you add value to those commodity products that increases the economic impact. So we talk about artisanal. That would be a gourmet ice cream, gelato, when the ice cream maker adds specific things to it, and perhaps there's a production where you can see the ice cream being made. That is adding value at each phase of the process. And as you can see here, that gives you the greatest economic impact. So don't think about just selling a piece of food. Think about selling an experience. Now, the good news is, after all that has been happening in the past 18 months, people still love good food and drink. And in fact, we look at what's been happening during the pandemic, and people have been cooking at home. We have been speaking with our parents and our grandparents and getting recipes from them, getting ideas, exchanging cookbooks, and so on. People have also been watching a lot of shows on Netflix and YouTube, food review shows. In fact, one of my favorite food reviewers, the best ever food review show, is a gentleman who was based in Vietnam until very recently. And all of his production team was there. So you may have heard of him. Sunnyside is his name. But anyway, the good news is we still love good food and drink. Now, let's talk about some of the changes in values that we've seen that will impact how you deliver gastronomy tourism in Vietnam. There has been a trend towards conscious consumerism. And what we mean by this is consumers, and when I say consumers, I'm primarily talking about North Americans, Europeans, Australians and New Zealanders, even places like Japan to some extent, Singapore. These are the countries that are leading with these changes. Now, not all countries have adopted this yet, but the trend is in this direction. So if United States and Canada and Western Europe are very strong on this, it stands to reason that in 10 or 15 years, this will also be very strong in places like Southeast Asia. But what we mean by this is that consumers are choosing businesses that have missions and values that are aligned with their own. So we want to make sure that the airline that we fly has a carbon offset program, for example. We want to make sure that the restaurant where we eat purchases fair trade products and pays its employees a fair wage. What this means is that consumers are in control of the conversation. Now, 20 years ago, the companies were in control of the conversation. A company would tell you what they wanted you to know about their product. And now information is power, and consumers can access all information instantly. So this means that whatever a company is saying, consumers may or may not believe it, and they will do their own checks. And the businesses that do align with the new traveler values are the businesses that are going to get more of the visitors coming to them. Now, 53% of leisure travelers are food lovers. We know that 53% of leisure travelers, all leisure travelers, choose a destination by the food and beverage experiences that await them. And this does not mean that they are special gourmet people or anything like that. It means that they are that food and beverage are so pervasive in society that they have such an important impact. Almost everyone loves to eat and drink. So we think that food and beverage should be the foundation of every tourism strategy, and not just gastronomy tourism, but tourism in general. So when we talk about food tourism, we also have to talk about sustainability and responsibility. These are important phenomena that are happening in the world right now, and people are talking about sustainability all the time. And so we need to know how that impacts what you do in Vietnam. Now, when we talk about sustainability, I like to think that responsibility is a better word for it. So when we talk about sustainability, I think a better term really is responsibility, because responsibility is more of a 360-degree way of looking at how we handle things as consumers. Sustainability to me means more that the company should be responsible for making a change and making sure that the products are in recyclable containers and so on. It is almost like the consumers don't have to be responsible about consuming the product. You know, I'll take the takeaway food and I'll just throw it away. But responsible tourism is being responsible for our own actions. So yes, the company selling the product must make sure that they are doing all the right things to make sure that they're having a very low impact on the environment. But the consumer also, the traveler, must also take some of that responsibility. You can see in the background here a waste bin. This was in New York City near the Statue of Liberty, and it's just shocking to me that people don't make the effort to put things in a recycling bin when there is a recycling bin right next to it. Now, unfortunately, not all of the world has adopted this particular perspective on behavior, but it is trending in this direction. Especially during the pandemic, it has really brought our focus around to how we are impacting the environment. And it's something that if you don't pay attention to this in Vietnam, and if you don't participate in this kind of behavior, then consumers are, well, ultimately, they could end up boycotting your country. I was in Nepal a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely shocked to learn that the country does not recycle. I just couldn't believe it. And I ended up taking all of my plastic bottles and paper cardboard products with me back to the UK where I was living so I could recycle them. This may sound extreme to you, but that's the kind of behavior I'm talking about. So you need to make sure that waste is minimized, that things are reused when they can be reused, and that recycling facilities are available. We're signatories of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, and this is a program from the UN, and you might want to look at that and see how you can participate in that program as well and get some guidelines from there. Now, we also know that culinary cultures are more important than ever. And like I was saying, people are, during lockdown, we were talking with our families, we were looking at cookbooks, we were cooking, and we were reinventing. We were relearning things that we had forgotten. Maybe people were used to purchasing prepared foods in grocery stores or just takeaway from restaurant and not really thinking about the food itself. But now we're thinking about not just the culture of our food, but the health of our food as well. We're thinking more about what goes into it. How much oil is in that? Are there saturated fats? Are there animal products in it? The rise of vegetarianism and veganism has been profound, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. Local sourcing is also critical. Now, this is something that you do very well in Vietnam, and this is something that should continue to be accentuated in everything that you do. By purchasing things from the local area or maybe just a few hundred kilometers away, you are reducing the carbon footprint. Now, this can actually become a marketing tactic. You can say on a menu, for example, that everything that we serve has been sourced within 50 kilometers. That is good because people will see that you did not fly something in from around the world. And when you think that travelers want things like Heineken beer, that's not necessarily the case. I was in Fiji a couple years ago, and I was looking, well, more than a couple years ago, and I was looking for a local beer. And the man at the bar said, "Well, we have American beers and we have European beers." And I said, "Well, I don't want those." I said, "I want a Fijian beer." And he reluctantly gave me one. And not only was the beer fine, it was a good beer, but the price difference was significant. It was $2 compared to the Heineken, which was $10. And why was that Heineken beer $10? Because it had to have been flown from Europe or perhaps a brewery in Australia or somewhere, and the cost of import and taxes and transportation were so high. That's not sustainable anymore. But also, you want to keep the profit local. So if you have a restaurant chain or a hotel chain, they might be sending as much as 80% of their profits back to corporate headquarters somewhere, which means that that money is leaving your area. Now, you might say, yes, but that big hotel is going to bring lots of jobs. Well, that's all that they're bringing. They are paying a minimum wage, and that is not a huge economic impact. All of the managers of the hotel, the owners, and all of the products are going to be imported, and that money will be exported. So it's actually a little like selling your soul to the devil. You won't be realizing the full economic benefits that you think you're going to be realizing because so much of that profit is exported. Now, we're also seeing a trend towards a better quality of life. So if you have any focus on products that look at wellness in Vietnam, this would be something that you should really embrace. And by better quality of life, we are talking about things like fair living wages. You may have heard of the concept of slow travel or even giving back. So donating time or donating money to those in need or organizations in need. But this is a shift towards a quality tourist as opposed to quantity tourist. And I don't know what the situation is like in Vietnam, but it's gotten to a point in several European cities and really some American cities too, where there are so many tourists that the quality of life or the quality of the visitor experience has been diminished dramatically. Cities like Venice, Italy, Barcelona, Spain, Amsterdam, or in the US, New York City and San Francisco are just so many people that it's just not pleasant to visit anymore. And this also means it affects the quality of life. So if you have cities that are overcrowded with visitors, then you might want to think about that. And data has shown that when people start traveling again, they're going to be looking for smaller cities and rural areas. They will not want to be in the big cities as much. So you should really think, when you think about your metrics, it's not about more. More is not always better, but think about the quality of the visitor and the quality of the experience that you're providing. You can charge more money as well. If there are fewer people, if the quality is higher, that can make up for the loss of volume that you would get from a higher quantity of visitors. Now let's look at some of the changes in products. During the pandemic, we have noticed that there's been a lot of product development work and product diversification work. And you may have heard the term pivot. Well, this has actually been a good thing. And whether those pivots have been driven by health issues like contactless payments or the hand sanitizers, or driven by finance, where a business, perhaps a tour business, has no customers anymore. And what are they going to do? So they've had to reinvent themselves. They've had to look at new ways to deliver products, or also taking advantage of technology. This is something that we've seen in the past 18 months, that technology has really made it possible to do a lot more. And even if you are looking at something like the disabled traveler, by offering a virtual and online tour, someone who does not have the ability to get in an airplane to visit you can still spend money with you. And this actually helps the problem of over tourism as well, when people are experiencing things virtually. So it's an interesting idea in terms of diversifying your product portfolio, that you're not necessarily selling only to tourists. There are other people out there that would be interested in tours, cooking classes, and so on, that you might be able to offer. We did talk briefly about special diets and how they're increasing. And by special diets, we mean food allergies, of course, are a big thing. Sesame, mustard, um, uh, dairy, sometimes gluten, sometimes sensitivity to these things. They can also be driven by people's preferences. So whether they don't want to eat something, or like I said, the sensitivities. So there may not be a full allergy, but maybe someone has discomfort if they eat gluten or dairy. And then also the religious and ethical reasons. So for example, vegans don't want to eat animal products because they don't want to enjoy something that an animal suffered to deliver that product. So these are all trends that you need to think about, and people are judging you when they come to your restaurant, when they come to your hotel, when they come to your city, and when they visit your markets, and they see things and they think, I'm not sure about that. And you might say, well, that's part of our culture. Well, yes, it's part of your culture to an extent, but gastronomy changes. Every 80 years or so, gastronomy changes, and the food that we're eating today is not the foods that our grandparents were eating 100 years ago. It changes. You have lots of influences happening all the time. So it's just something to be aware of. More and more people will be coming asking for things that are gluten-free or dairy-free, or they'll say, does this have peanuts in it? And you have to be certain, because people can die if you don't tell them the truth. So these are just some things to be aware of. We did talk about disabilities and how they could still spend money with you even if they can't travel. But it's also easier than ever for people with disabilities to travel. And when we say disabilities, it's not just physical. It could be mental or emotional disabilities. For example, someone who has autism, they may be able to get, physically they could get into a plane, but maybe they have a fear of crowds, or they have a fear of enclosed spaces, and that prevents them from traveling. There are lots of ways to look at this, but like I said, if you are able to offer services to physically disabled travelers, that's great. If you're not, then perhaps you could consider an online offer, something virtual that they could still enjoy and still spend money with you. Health and safety will continue to be a concern well into next year, and make sure that when you are showing what you do with regard to your customers' safety, make sure that you have this information in multiple languages. It's also important to realize that there's no consistent standards around the world, and there's a lot of confusion around this. So people may see different things happening. They may see that they have to show a vaccine passport to get into one business or hotel, but not somewhere else. And this creates lots of confusion and even resentment among travelers. So you'll need to be very clear and transparent about your policies and make sure that people understand as well, because if you don't, then that bad word of mouth engine starts, and that's not what you want. All right, let's talk about some of the changes in technology that we've seen. Contactless goes mainstream, and I say finally here because in some countries, contactless is actually a latecomer, especially in places like the United States, which did not even have chip and pin 10 years ago, but in Europe, they did. And so the rest of the world is catching up quickly. But contactless is an important tool for someone like a street vendor, street food, where they're used to taking cash. And we all know why people prefer cash. We don't need to discuss it, but we do know why. But credit card companies have shown that if a vendor takes a credit card, that their sales can be as much as 3 times higher by accepting a card. So if you have a street stall, for example, in a high touristed area, and you only accept cash, even if you have to pay tax on it, imagine if your sales are 3 times higher, you're still ahead. So it's something to think about. I know that in some countries it's expensive to rent these terminals, and some of the bank fees can be extra high. So work with your partners like the Restaurant Association of Vietnam, and they will help guide you to the best possible solutions for you and your business. Now, artificial reality and virtual reality are right around the corner, and they're already being used in certain products. So here you have a couple of products. There's a distillery in the United States. There's a winery in Australia, 19 Crimes. And that wine label is very interesting because if you take your phone over the wine label and you can, if you have the app, you can scan the label, and the labels have people on them. And when you scan your phone over the label, the people talk to you and they tell you their story of how they came to Australia. You may know that Australia was settled by convicts from England. And so you have these people who have committed these crimes, and they tell you the story of the crime they committed and how they were shipped to Australia. It's really quite clever. So you might want to check into that. But keep in mind that these tools are designed to save time, money, and hassle. And this is coming whether you like it or not, whether you're prepared for it or not. So if you have any technology partners, you might want to talk to them and say, hey, how can my business do more with this? And also something to think about, if more and more people are able to experience things virtually, so from the comfort of their own home and also not having to spend the money to travel, are we going to need as many hotels? And this is a question I ask because we always see hotels being built in every city in the world. And I have to wonder, when is enough enough? And you could also argue that, well, the population is always growing, especially in places like Southeast Asia, where the population grows quite quickly. But it's just something to think about. Maybe not as many hotels would be needed as before. Now let's talk about changes in process. Smaller is faster. And by this, I mean that during the past 18 months, we've had to, the businesses that have gotten ahead more quickly are the businesses that are smaller because they're owned by one or two people and they can make decisions very quickly, these pivots that we've talked about. So here's a couple businesses. One is a food tour operator here, Local Food Adventures in Oakland, California, USA. And the other is Traveling Spoon, which is an online cooking class company. These are small businesses that could make decisions fast and make adjustments as needed to survive during the past 18 months. And I believe that a lot of the businesses in Vietnam are quite small as well. And this is good news for you because it means that as a small business owner, you too can make fast decisions. You know, if a product isn't selling, get rid of it. If you need to integrate technology into what you're doing, do that. And you don't have to wait for some corporate headquarters in New York or London somewhere telling you what to do. You can do it yourselves and you can do it quickly. Now, I don't know if this is something that's happening in Vietnam, but it's happening in most countries around the world. So I would assume you're probably seeing some of this too. We're seeing a lot of labor and food shortages. And by labor, I mean that people are not able to find people to work in hotels and restaurants and so on. It's a bit of a concern, actually. And food shortages, there's been a huge shortage of shipping containers and delays in shipping ports around the world. In fact, there's a 2-month delay to unload containers in the port of Los Angeles. This means that products are not arriving. And if you're shipping out products, for example, let's say that you make a hot sauce or a fish sauce or that wonderful sriracha sauce that I love from Vietnam. If you're making those products, they may be delayed somewhere and they're not getting to consumers, and that means you're not making the sales. So in some countries like the United Kingdom and the United States, people have started to hire people who are just out of prison. Now that may sound strange to you, but actually this can become a marketing triumph. Now I don't know if this would necessarily work in Vietnam, but it's nevertheless, it's something that's happening elsewhere in the world, and it's something that you need to be aware of. But because of these labor shortages and food shortages, the prices are rising. And this is making certain parts of travel inaccessible to some people. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Right. So travel is going to stay expensive. And this is something that we weren't sure when the pandemic was starting how things would change. You know, would travel companies increase their prices to make up for their losses, or would companies go out of business, or what exactly would happen? Well, now we know the answer, and the answer is companies have pretty much doubled their prices on everything. I'm flying from Europe to the United States, where my ticket this time is twice what it was 2 years ago. And then I was so shocked. I mean, I have to go because we're producing an event there, but I was so shocked at the cost of the airplane ticket, the cost of the car rental, the cost of the hotel. I don't want to travel again to the United States. It was shocking. And, the cost of it, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what it was, but I will not be able to do this very often. And I think what will happen is when people see the cost of a long flight, say, for example, to Vietnam, they are going to think twice and say, wow, that like Los Angeles to Saigon or Hanoi, that used to be, I don't know, let's call it $1,000 or $1,200. Now it's $3,000. Wow, I can't afford that. And especially if you are going with a partner or a family, that you would have spent $5,000 for everybody on airfare, and now it's going to be $20,000 for airfare. People won't do it. So this means that at least for the near future, until those travel prices come down, if they come down, you're going to need to focus on local and regional tourism. Now, this is good news because you're near a massive market called China, and the flights from China to Vietnam are not going to be that expensive. But it may mean that you won't get as many Australians as before as well. You won't get as many Americans. You won't get as many French coming because it's going to be too expensive. When will they come back in mass? That's hard to say. It's going to depend on the cost of travel. And I think we've all seen that when prices go up, they usually don't go back down, or if they do, it's not as much. So let's say that all the prices have doubled. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, the prices will go down by 30%. That still means I'm paying 70% more than I did 2 years. And people's incomes are not keeping up with that. So I do think that you're going to see a slowdown in international travelers, and you should prepare for that. Now, the chairman of Airbnb said that people are taking fewer and longer trips. And I agree with this. And it's really because of all the hassles that people are experiencing. Do you need an antigen test? Do you need a PCR test? Is there quarantine? Is my country closed? Is it a green country? Is it a yellow country? Is it a red country? Oh, the rules just changed again. So when I go to the United States, I realized that the PCR, the test I had done wasn't the right test, and now I have to get a different test. So that's another 100 euros. It's crazy. It's just ridiculous. But also people are having shorter work weeks, especially in places like Europe or North America. People are working more at home and getting more work done at home, and the number of hours worked per week is getting less. But because of these increased costs too, people say, well, if I maybe took 5 or 6 holidays a year, now I'm just going to take 1 or 2. So again, that's more competition for that visitor's share of wallet, something that you need to plan for. So we did talk about more local and regional trips. Here's some data from Focusrite, which is a travel industry research company. And this was looking at American travelers last year, and this was their propensity to travel. So you can see in the light blue, there was a huge favor of traveling domestically in the United States, and especially by older people, there was very little interest in traveling internationally. So this, of course, will change over time, but that international demand is still not there. Now, this is also a bit of a paradigm shift to look at locals as ambassadors. And you may think, well, we want people from overseas. We want the foreign money. We want to be able to charge those higher prices. Well, if they're not coming, what do you do? And I think that you should refocus your tourism marketing efforts a little bit domestically and help to make the local Vietnamese ambassadors. So when they travel, regardless of where they travel to, whether it's to Cambodia or the Philippines or China or Hong Kong, or if they travel further afield to the US and Canada and Europe, everyone who leaves Vietnam, every Vietnamese person is an ambassador, and they can be talking about the wonderful food and drink that you have. New Zealand used this strategy during the pandemic, and they were very successful in educating the New Zealand residents about the wonderful food and drink products that New Zealand had. Many New Zealanders did not really know what they had. They needed it to be told to them. And this is something that you might want to think about as well, how to engage local residents so they can become those ambassadors for your products or your destinations. And I think really what this means is our industry is experiencing a rebirth, a renaissance. Things are changing. We are reinventing everything that we're doing. So the ways that you've done business in the past may not continue to work. And don't be scared of that. It's okay. It just means that you'll have to think of doing things differently. Perhaps where you find your customers will change as well. And change is hard, but change is there, and we need to be ready for it. And unfortunately, to survive, you are going to have to embrace that change. So the key takeaways from today's talk are the following. First of all, in the past 2 years, we've seen tremendous change, and really a lot of change in how people behave and how people act and how people buy. We now know that you must weave sustainability into all of your messaging. It will get you more customers. It will get you more, it will help to build your brand and make your brand stronger. But ultimately, it's the right thing to do as well. And talking with, we have an intern from Vietnam, and she's talked about the pollution in Vietnam and how it's a problem and how it's affecting the waterways, which are an important part of your agricultural industry there. So, you need to invest in your future because, for making a few dong today as opposed to 10 years from now, it could be a problem in the very near future. Also, keep in mind that culinary travelers are not all the same. We have different diets, we have different preferences, we have different income levels and different values. And a lot of times you'll see destinations just send messaging out to all foodies or to all gourmet people. Well, positioning yourself as a gourmet destination when you're not is a big mistake. Peru has done that. And we wrote an article about Peru on our website. And I don't understand why the country did this positioning, but they have 3 Michelin restaurants in the city of Lima, their biggest city. But that does not equate to a gourmet tourism strategy. And so when you come to Peru, you'll have great food, but the number of gourmet choices would be limited. So if you are a gourmet lover, that's not going to work. And so you need to think about really who your customers are and refining your message and making sure that the messages you're sending out are the correct messages at all times. I think costs are going to remain high, and you need to prepare for that. How is your business going to survive if the international travelers can't come yet? And then focusing on the quality and not the quantity of visitors. It's okay to make this adjustment and think about how you're going to serve a better quality product to fewer people. You will have to raise your prices, but people will pay for quality. They'll pay for convenience. They'll pay for fewer crowds. And find better ways to spotlight and support the local food and beverage supply chain. So if you are experiencing any of those issues with supply of products in Vietnam, how can you work to be part of the solution and not part of the problem? So if your business usually uses, 100 ducks a week or something like that, but you're having a hard time getting the ducks, what does it mean? Well, maybe you don't sell as many ducks. snacks. Maybe you offer a different kind of dish. You could focus on vegetarian and vegan, which is trending at exponential rates. And then help local businesses to embrace technology quickly. So it doesn't matter if you're a tourism office or if you are an organization, or maybe you're a business that understands technology really well. You can help your local business owners and friends to improve their businesses quickly too. Don't look at these fellow businesses as competition. They are your partners. So we say in English that a rising tide floats all boats. This means as the tide in the bay or in the port goes up, all of the boats are going up at the same time. So it's not, I don't know that you have this approach in Vietnam. Some countries do. Even within the United States, where I lived in Portland, we were very much that way, but not all American cities were like that. But ultimately, when you can support your neighbor, the neighboring restaurant, the neighboring hotel, it's good, and it looks good when you say, "Hey, we're busy, we're full right now, but my friend down the street has got also great food, and come back tomorrow an hour earlier, and you can eat here." That's the kind of thing that makes travelers wants. That's what makes travelers want to like you more and to spend more money with you. And lastly, focus on your own area's unique selling propositions, whether it's wellness or health or clean cuisine, whatever it is. You need to think about what is unique. If everybody is selling the same dish, what makes yours special? Maybe you put something different on top, or maybe you give people a cookie on top of it as well, something a little different. And with this, keep in mind too, people aren't coming to Vietnam to have Italian food, to even have French food, to have Japanese food or Chinese food. International travelers are coming to Vietnam because we want Vietnamese food. So promoting those international cuisines is not necessarily, you're not going to get a lot of people from that. Now, again, not all travelers are the same. Some people, especially those people on package tours who are driven by price, they may be very happy with an Italian meal or a French meal or a Chinese meal, and that's fine. But I'm talking about the way travel is trending and the way consumers are changing. And if 53% of people are driven by the options for local cuisine, then I think that speaks right there that put your Vietnamese food forward, put your regional foods forward, help people to understand the regional differences within Vietnam, and how people can get the most out of their visit to your wonderful, beautiful country of very gracious people. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been a pleasure. I only wish that I could have met you all in person. Hopefully next year when we do this again, we'll be able to do that in person as well. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Stay safe, and best of luck to a more successful business in 2022.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn ông Eric Wolf. Thank you, Mr. Eric Wolf again. Mr. Eric Wolf from WFTA. Xin cảm ơn ông về phần chia sẻ rất là bổ ích và cụ thể về xu hướng và cơ hội du lịch ẩm thực gần đây cho Việt Nam. Thank you again. Tiếp theo đây thì chúng tôi xin kính mời quý vị khán giả sẽ đến với buổi thảo luận với các chuyên gia quốc tế về phát triển tiềm năng du lịch ẩm thực Việt Nam trong giai đoạn mới. What's up next? I would like to invite all the guests to come to a panel discussion with the topic Unlocking the Potential of Vietnam's Gastronomy Tourism in the New Normal. I would like to introduce the moderator for this panel discussion, Mr. Linh Lê, Principal and Co-founder at Luxperia DMC Collective. So, yeah, Mr. Linh Lê, you can take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to start my video now. So if you can bear with me. It says the host has stopped the video. Can you allow my video? Well, I'll just continue without the video for the time. So yeah, thanks for everybody for being here. Today we're at the fourth panel session for the Asia Food and Beverage Summit 2021. It's wonderful to be here. As Kun said, my name's Lynn, and I'll be your moderator for this next session. I'd also like to say thank you to the Restaurant Association of Vietnam for putting me in touch with this great opportunity and this network of really talented people in the food and beverage tourism industry. So today we've got some extremely talented people. Of course, we've got Eric Wolf. And Eric, thank you so much for the presentation of how recent gastronomy tourism trends and opportunities there are in Vietnam. We also have Miss Lauren Shannon, who is the GM and founder of Arigato Japan, and also True Taste Tokyo. We have a gentleman by the name of Neville Dean, an Australian like me, who resides in Hoi An and is host and ambassador for his own touring and culinary focused tours. So thank you, Neville, for joining us. We also have Huang Nhan, our top chef for Vietnam. So with all due respect, let's commence the session. I know we are running very, very close to time, so I'll commence. But why don't we start with Eric, and allow me to ask Eric, the first question is, how important is food tourism to a restaurant and F&B business?
Well, that's a, oh, it says recording stopped. Is that okay?
I think just continue, Eric.
Okay, all right. It really depends on where the restaurant is. Of course, if the restaurant is in a high footfall area, then of course tourism is going to be an incredibly important part of that business. But if a restaurant is located in a rural area or in the suburbs of a city, it may be counting on more locals or more people living in the neighborhood. So it's really hard to say. I think that it really is on a case-by-case basis. You can't just generalize, but we do know that food and beverage is one of the largest industries in the world, as are travel and hospitality. So I think it's pretty fair to say that most people, well, 53% of people, as we heard in the previous presentation, are choosing their destination for food and drink. So I would say that the traveler factor is exceedingly important to most restaurants in most popular destinations.
And one of the interesting ideas about Vietnam being a contributing to the culinary food scene, let's ask somebody who is here. Neville, what's your perception on this question, please?
Oh, you're muted, Neville.
Okay, with you. I believe food tourism, properly done, is the most exciting opportunity for the food and beverage industry in Vietnam. It's in its infancy. Food and beverage tourism only started back here, especially in Hoi An, in the early 90s. So it's really only been around about 30 years. And already it's getting a name, but the name is yet to be realised, the real name for the culinary excellence of Vietnam. We've got the freshest, healthiest, most delicious food in the world. I'm not going to qualify that. We've got 1,700 dishes from one end of Vietnam to the other with regional variations. Come on, no other country can claim anything like that. Eric, earlier today, defined food tourism as the act of travelling for a taste of place in order for a sense of place. Now that I take both literally and figuratively, and I'm going to talk about the figuratively side. The taste is not only the taste of the food, but it's the taste through the people, through the heart of the people. In Vietnam, we've got a word called Kiel Thai. Please forgive me, those who are not Vietnamese. That surprises most people. But it's the taste of the heart. And the food industry, I'm talking about restaurants in particular, are the local face of food here in Vietnam. And through using that local face to create theatre for the food, it is easily the biggest opportunity Vietnam has to attract the culinary-minded or the food-minded throughout the world. So it's something that businesses, I'm talking about restaurants, need to focus in. It's not about people coming in and ordering what they know about Vietnamese food. People arriving in Vietnam don't know about Vietnamese food. They maybe know 3 or 4 dishes. I said before, there are 1,700 regional dishes from one end of Vietnam to the other. If you go to Hanoi, you can order, there's bun cha or chakalabong. Huh? What's that? Person arriving off the plane has no idea. You, the restaurant industry, have the opportunity to act as the theatre for this food and present it in a way that really keeps the memory of Vietnam very, very high in their mind. So when they go back, it's the memories and the stories they tell about Vietnam. We are on the edge of the most exciting time for Vietnam using its culinary side. It's a long-winded answer, but it really comes from my heart.
Neville, I tend to agree with you in terms of tourism coming into Vietnam, being of the tourism background myself. I know that the culinary aspects and the food tours that have developed with street food touring, times and interactions with chefs, they're the sort of things that people are attracted to, and it really is an emerging destination for culinary tourism. I'd like to get Lauren's response on this question, since she is a pioneer in her own right in terms of creating food tours in Japan.
Well, thank you so much. And it's great to be here today and nice to see familiar faces like Eric and meet all the rest of you. I just have 2 quick comments because I know we're kind of, we have a lot of questions we want to get to today. First, I would say I'd like to disagree respectfully with Eric just a little bit about the F&B business really benefiting only in the destinations where there is already tourism traffic. And what I would say about this is he's right, but you have an opportunity in Vietnam to feature more rural chefs and cuisine in those popular destinations. So a technique that we use a lot in Japan is, one of my favorite words in Japanese is matsuri, which just means festival. And it can be religious festival or food festival or coffee festival. And we have them all the time. And in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, these major destinations, they will host a matsuri or a festival, and they will invite top chefs, interesting restaurants, local food producers from the rural areas to come and be featured in the urban center. And that has like 2 great advantages. One, the tourists who are already there have an exciting event that they can go to that's kind of special during the time that they're there. But then speaking to Eric's view on local ambassadors, if your own urban citizens who are going to be traveling overseas, if they start being exposed in these local festivals to regional differences, regional chefs that are coming to a major urban area, they're going to be able to go and talk about that around the world. And I think that can't be underestimated. And I want to say F&B is more than just our restaurateurs too. It's all of your artisanal food producers and sauce makers and spice makers. And all of those people can be really highly featured, even if the tourists are not yet in their destination. And once people know that like amazing Vietnamese coffee comes from this region up here in the mountains, if they see it at this festival, both domestic travelers and regional travelers and international travelers are really going to start seeking out those destinations. You can put something on the map with a properly placed support from a DMO or a DMC in a major urban area. So I would just say like that's a big focus. And then a little bit of something about me. I came into tourism about 10 years ago, but previously I was a restaurant owner and catering owner. So I had my own restaurant company. And I would say that if you want to be on the scene as a restaurant, if you really want to make a name for yourself for inbound visitors, and domestic travelers too, you have to concentrate more than just the food. You really need to think about how you welcome those people. As Neville said, how you educate them about what the dish is, what kind of stories you tell, what kind of memories they make in your restaurant. I was at a little ramen shop. I'm traveling in Japan right now along the coastal seaside, and I was in a little noodle shop that had a seafood-based ramen. And when I left, the mother of the restaurant came out and brought me local oranges as a parting gift just because she knew I was a visitor and I wasn't a local. Those kinds of connections, like I already wrote her a review on Google Reviews. I've already told people, oh, you've got to go to this place. And that's just like one visit. But it was more the food was great, of course, but it was also that connection that she made with me across cultures. So that's also a long answer, but I just want to say, like, don't think inside the box. It's not just your restaurant. There's so many food events you can do to highlight the regional cuisine all over Vietnam. Just think about those opportunities. And this is a great time to prepare things like that while we're waiting for tourism to reopen.
Thank you for that. I think both answers have got equal rights in this conversation. I see one side is Eric saying, go with what's local, what is existing infrastructure, and Ms. Lauren saying, okay, well, if there is existing infrastructure, let's create a opportunity for more guests to arrive and come to the destination. So there's a real chicken or the egg philosophy on both sides there. Eric, would you agree?
Well, actually, I support what Lauren says as well. It like I said, every destination is unique and it really depends. And they say that when travel restarts, people are going to be looking for more rural experiences anyway. But you can't just throw people onto a rural itinerary and say, here you go have fun, or this is where the coffee comes from. You have to create a product, and the product has to be of sufficient quality. And you have to make sure that you have guides who speak the language of the guests and all these things. There's so many moving parts. So I think that it's a tremendous opportunity for product development, but don't launch the products until they're ready.
Exactly. I agree with that, Eric.
Yeah. And also, to add on to that, I also think that we need to market differently after COVID. And by creating destination-focused events, marketing the destination in partnership with some of the highlights that one can find from a culinary point of view, is definitely something that is going to speak to the post-COVID traveler. So this does lead me to the next question, and that's, how do we engage with one another, from restaurateur to local manufacturer? Lauren, you've started to take lead on answering this one, so I'm going to go back to you on how stakeholders can work together.
Yeah, you really need to identify a few people that can understand. So get someone who really has that vision. A chef is a great place to start because they already love local products. They have a special spice that they like to use. Like, dig out those stories and then get in a room with 4 or 5 people and say, hey, what can we do? And even if you start with a small pop-up featuring, telling, the biggest problem I see is that we don't share the stories behind what we're eating. And that's really what people want to connect with. They don't want to just have a great culinary experience. We can do that all over the world, and that's fine. But when we travel, the other reason we travel is to make local connections, to meet people and to hear their stories. And every dish has a story. Every dish has a story, whether it's the story of your grandmother or the story of your area or the story of the producer. And so what you need to do is someone like you or someone like Neville needs to create like a conference where you're getting together like 10 people to start from different sides of the industry and say, okay, what do we want to do? And then just start from there. It always takes a few passionate people to get things started. There's a huge movement around the world, like a taste of New York, a taste of San Francisco, a taste of Tokyo. That started with just a couple of people saying, hey, we should do a restaurant week in New York, right? Like, we should do a week where we promote all of these local restaurants, mom and pop businesses. And now that kind of thing is a sort of a global phenomenon. So what do you want to create in Vietnam? Who are 3 or 4 people to start with that would want to get behind it, and then expand that to 10 people and then 50 people and then see where you go. But try to make sure everyone's represented. Get some producers in the room, get some chefs in the room, get some tour guides in the room, and then see what happens. And I imagine that recipe is a really good mix for a delicious culinary outlook for Vietnam.
Cool. Speaking of chefs, the food scene is made up of a diverse group of people, ranging from street food vendors to commercial operations, all the way to high end. So I'd like to introduce Hoàng Nhân to our group. His video is not working right now, but if you can unmute yourself, Huang, we can start talking about how high-end chefs can integrate with local cuisine in order to promote the fine dining scene, because this is actually an audience question that's come through. And the question is, of course, everybody talks about pho, noodle soup, and banh mi on the street, but how can our panelists advise the rest of our audience on how we can integrate fine dining into the mix with Vietnam's with brand Vietnam?
You have to unmute yourself. Oh.
Mr. Nhan, you there? Okay, Nhan, you there?
Seems like he still can't unmute himself.
Yeah. Eric or Neville, what do you think about that question? Integrating high-end establishments and fine dining into the pre-existing brand of street food that Vietnam has already?
Yes, that's a difficult question to answer when it comes to Vietnam, because Vietnam's got such a range of different eating opportunities that fine dining will always have a market for those people who arrive in Vietnam with a sense of nervousness about eating Vietnamese food from the street. So there'll always be people who'll want to dine as if they were dining in New York, Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Rome. There'll always be a market for that. But in that sense, they are still ambassadors for Vietnamese food as well. So I think that fine dining will have a place in the market. There are fine dining establishments, comparatively speaking, fine dining establishments in Vietnam. There's no Michelin star restaurants yet. But yes, it's a definite market. It's a niche market, but it's a definite market which has the same theme of opportunity through the promotion of Vietnamese cuisine. I hope I haven't just answered the question.
I think the pre-existing notion of coming to Vietnam and having banh mi or pho, or as we know, a lot of it commonly is street food. And like you mentioned, we do not have Michelin star restaurants yet. However, we certainly do have a decent mix of Michelin trained or high-end trained chefs as well. So from my perspective, what I'm seeing from the likes of Peter Kung Franklin, for example, or Mr. Tung from Tung Dining, a lot of these guys, they are integrating the traditional essence and the ingredients and merging their skills on a high level to create some kind of a fusion of a modern Vietnamese style cuisine. And I guess, Eric, you'd know from your perspective that this is something that's tried and true in many other destinations. Vietnam just happens to be still at the beginning of it. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have to refer people back to that article that we wrote about Peru and their Michelin star restaurants. It's a very small economic impact, but that's not really the point here. The point is more that there are, like Neville was saying, there are people who are going to want the higher end experience. There are people who are going to want the traditional experience. And I think that the finer dining opportunities they represent an innovation in cuisine. Yes. And I think that we, in our Taste to Place report, we also address this very same issue about Vietnam, is that, there's going to be certain people who they've tried all of the traditional food, they understand it, they get it, or people who don't want the street food, or people who feel like they're pretty familiar with Vietnamese food, but they want to know what's next, what's the next level of Vietnamese food, and that would be those fine dining opportunities. But then I think too, underscore what Lauren was saying, that I would caution you not to focus only on restaurants and not just on sexy food photos. It is about the stories behind the people and the faces behind the places. So as many stories that you, or as many recipes or as food photos or restaurants that you promote, you need just as many pictures of people and just as many stories of those people telling their stories to complement the other things, because it's you know, you show a picture of food that can be anywhere in the world. What makes it uniquely Vietnamese? Well, it's this lady whose name is so and so, and she does the soup this exact special way. You know, like when you think about a video person coming to film, they get into the story. They're looking for a character. They're looking for a personality. They want the story, the backstory of that lady and how she became famous in the village because of how she cooked something. You know, that's what you need.
I would just like to add that I saw some great innovation in Bangkok in 2019. I went there before COVID, obviously, and I went to sort of a trendy, like happening restaurant. And one of the things I thought was super interesting that they did was they had a cocktail menu of cocktails that were all representing the flavors of super famous street food Thai dishes. So I would say, like, we're talking food and beverage, not just food, right? Think of the innovative ways that your fine dining chefs can embrace the traditions of the street food and brand Vietnam in a new way in a fine dining setting. And it was so cool because the cocktails that I tried 3 different cocktails while I was there. It was quite a fun night, I will say, but all 3 of them tasted exactly like the dishes that I've had and love in Thailand. And it wasn't just like a gimmick, right? They really thought about what are the things, the flavors that you take away from this dish. And so I would say that's another piece of it. I'm not big on like fusion for fusion's sake, but you know, you guys are already famous as well in the US for Viet Cajun, right? So there's chefs that have come back that moved
I've
from
heard of that.
Oh yeah, so there's a really famous chef. She was on Anthony Bourdain's show, I think, before he passed away, or David Chang's, and she was living in the U.S. And putting her spin on Cajun food with Vietnam flavors, and she brought that back to Vietnam as a street food. So I think that there's some great ways that you can capitalize on that. And I would look to some of your neighbors that are just slightly ahead on the curve of that kind of innovative crossover between fine dining and local food, and see where those intersections are. And think outside the box. Think about the ingredients. Think of the stories of the producers. I'd love to see more fine dining chefs have on their menu and their restaurant websites and information stories about the people who make the ingredients that they use. Stories about where a dish came from or how they changed it. You know, this was inspired by this, and then I did this to it. Like, people want to know, and that's going to like open up a whole field of opportunity for your restaurants and for brand Vietnam.
Thanks, Lauren. I see that when we're talking about stakeholders and people within the industry, we're talking about chefs, we're talking about suppliers, and understanding and learning about where those supplies and ingredients come from. We want to hear about the stories behind the ingredients, not only about the egocentric chef. So is it a case that we need to understand and collaborate more so on the distribution channel of creating of food?
I think the chefs already know those people, but one thing, it's not even just egocentric, it's that chefs are usually back of the house. And what you need is a really good front of the house person to collect and tell those stories. So you need to train your waiters and waitresses. You need to work with the chef's partner. It doesn't always have to be the chef talking, but go ask the chef, why do you like this sauce? Let's find out where this comes from, like this ingredient, this spice. A lot of them already know, but to them, it's like everyday work, right? They're not thinking about the story, but they already know why they like it. So just ask the question, I guess. Like, get some of your reporters, focus on the media, bring them as a stakeholder as well, and say, like, let's stop talking only about banh mi and street food. Let's talk about where things come from, and let's focus on some of those stories. See if you can get some people to write, bloggers and influencers, focus on the producers, and then that kind of flows through your fine dining.
Cool. And I guess my summation from this, and taking on board what all three of you have said, is that it should be the marketers of these food experiences, or the marketers of the restaurants, to go to delve a little bit deeper, talking with the chefs, because it is the chefs that have the passion and the drive to understand where and the authenticity of where this food comes from. At the end of the day, we're not looking for nice pictures of the food. Like Eric said, we need to hear the stories and the pictures of the people where the food that has delivered the food.
And your tour guides, I'm sure Neville will agree with this, your tour guides are already super hungry for those stories. It's like pulling teeth. We go into restaurants as a tour operator and we're like, tell me about your food. I want to be able to say something to my guests, right? Like, we don't want to just say, here's the dish. But sometimes it's like pulling teeth. It's like trying to figure out where something comes from. If the restaurant side, if the F&B side is more forthcoming, your tour guides will talk about it. We are always looking for stuff to talk about. So that's not a problem. They are there. They're ready to talk about whatever your dishes are. I'm sure, Neville, you said you're working as a tour operator. Do you agree with that?
I'm working as a tour operator, and I've got a confession, mate. I've never been on a food tour in my life.
Well, you got to go on one.
I'm surrounded by experts. I'm surrounded by locals. And really, Vietnamese food is different to any other cuisine in the world. We eat because we think we're hungry. It's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Vietnamese eat for 5 reasons. Vietnamese eat for metabolism, for texture, for taste, for health and taste appeal. We need to understand that. We, as Vietnamese, take that for granted. We say, but that's how we do it. But when you're coming as a visitor, this is all new news to you. This is something that, it's a 3,000-year-old food culture. And we need to excite the locals about this food culture. Vietnamese never put anything in their mouth unless they know the health benefits. When it comes to texture, there's 5 textures: crispy, crunchy, chewy, soft, and silky. And we need to explain that in the context of every food, every one of the Vietnamese dishes that we're offering in the restaurant. They eat for taste. You read Wikipedia, it's got 5 tastes. We've got 7 tastes. We've got the spice, bitter, sour, sweet, umami, piquancy, and salty. Umami is one of the big takeaways from Vietnam. And the umami comes in the form of fish sauce. We are the fish sauce capital of the world. People in Vietnam consume more fish sauce per head of population than any other country in the world. We need to excite people about I'm talking about our people, the restaurant staff, about those things which they take for granted. And we need to then excite the visitor there. We are the theatre behind the Vietnamese food. Our tour has 40 tastings. In 3 hours, we offer 40 tastings. We've got 3 tour hosts, and every one of those tastings have got a narrative behind it, exactly the same as there. So we've got something to be very excited about, and our people want to tell that story. The story of Vietnamese food is the greatest food story in the world, bar none. We've got a 3,000-year-old heritage dish on our tour. 3,000-year-old heritage dish. These are the stories which can never be told by any other country in the world. So we've really got something to be excited about. You've just got to know about it and get excited yourself. Vietnamese, the problem with Vietnamese in general is that they take all this as granted. Come from the outside, see it from the outside perspective, and you've got the greatest story about food anywhere in the world here in Vietnam. I'm slightly interested in Vietnamese cuisine. You may.
Neville, you've allowed me to anchor this question in order to respond to a question from the audience. The audience has actually asked, can you share with us a case study on developing a high-end experience-rich culinary tour in your past? And I think you're the perfect candidate to answer this question. How did you go about starting your tours?
As I said, I've never been to a food tour in my life, but back in Australia, back in the island state of Tasmania, Tasmania is the food capital of Australia. It's the food island of Australia. And we had friends come from all over, and we would put them in a van, a bus, and we'd take them around Tasmania, sharing the best of Tasmania. We'd have the best salmon. We had the best lobster. We had food, cheese, which you cannot believe about. And we'd take not one place we took them was a restaurant. We took them to producers. We took them where the people were living the food themselves. And we got excited about that. Then I got invited to Vietnam to do the keynote address at the Businessman's National Conference there. And on that one visit, a very short 1 week visit, I fell in love with Vietnam. I fell in love with Vietnam, the food culture, but the food culture involved the people. And I come back to my wife in Tasmania and I told her all about Vietnam. She knew it was somewhere in Asia and she wished them all the best, but no interest. Bit by bit, we started coming to Vietnam. And when we come to Vietnam, I was not coming up here for a food tour. I was coming up here to do something completely different, another story, another day. And I was down on the front Bac Dan Avenue in Hoi An, and I was sitting at a restaurant table right out the front near the menu, and two American women come up to the menu, and one said to the other, "Are there hamburgers on the menu?" And the other one said no, and they walked off. And that's when I had the burning bush moment. People were coming to Vietnam and had no idea about Vietnamese cuisine. All I had to do was find out about Vietnamese food, and then I've got a thing called a food tour. It wasn't even a food tour, it was a tasting room. And then some wise, I'll thank her forever, a travel agency managers come and said to me, "Tell me about, why don't you do a walking tour?" What's a walking tour? Walk along the street and tell people about the food. Okay, so my wife and I walked along the street, one's about 1.5 kilometres, a mile. And in that same mile we walk today, that is 12 years later. And on that same mile is the story of Vietnamese food, step by step along the road, just taking it from the street. We never go to a restaurant. None of our food is sourced from restaurants. It's sourced from the people behind the food, the manufacturers, the producers, the street vendors themselves. And the story behind that has led to 40 plus tastings. We never tell people how many tastings. And the stories behind that food are told by the Vietnamese. I'm not Vietnamese, but when Phil tells it, when Nam tells it, when Sen tells it, every two of these three people working tell the story. They're telling story from their heart about their parents, about their forefathers. They're talking about the heritage of Hoi An and the heritage of Vietnamese food through Hoi An. So it was a natural for me to be involved in something that I kind of like doing.
Lovely. And I guess, does this, I'm sensing from Lauren's face that this is a little bit of a similar experience when you started the True Taste Tokyo.
Well, True Taste Tokyo, so I come at this from a mix of everything. True Taste Tokyo is kind of a marketing arm. Arigato Japan is a walking food tour company, and we do exactly what Neville is describing. We go different places, 4 or 5 stops on a tour, try 12 to 15 to 20 different flavors and dishes, some small bites, some bigger, heavier stuff, and we give a really good broad brushstroke. But what I would want to encourage you guys to think about, and I'm sure that Neville already does this in his team, but he didn't mention it. And I think this is wise to say for the folks that are coming at this from the F&B side, is that food is, you're not going to just be sharing the food. In Arigato Japan's case, so Japan is also super obsessed with food. I would have to argue with Neville about his claim on Vietnam being best in the world. Of course, we're very proud of Japan as well and our umami flavors, but I love it, Neville, it's great. But what I would say is, in Japan, we're super obsessed with food as well. And all of those foods are also a gateway into culture. It's not just about, we actually do sightseeing and history and cultural experiences through the gateway of food. So we use food to introduce dining customs, what people do after work in Japan, like that particular custom in Japan, what different types of restaurants are and where they came from, why they're designed a certain way. A pub in Japanese is called izakaya, and that actually comes from stopping and having small bites in a liquor shop. So 400 years ago, the sake producers used to put out little snacks so that people would come and try the sake and buy it and take it home. This is like in the Edo samurai era. So they would give them little bites of food. And that's where our pub tradition comes from. So these are really interesting stories. You can dig even deeper, that 3,000-year-old dish. That's an amazing, I'm super intrigued, Neville. I want to try this 3,000-year-old historic cuisine because I'm sure that will tell me so much about Vietnamese culture and heritage and history. And so, I think the way to start it is just think about 2 or 3 stories that you want people to remember when they go back home. And how can you express that in food? What are the stories that when someone leaves Vietnam, what do you want them to think, feel, and remember? And how does that play out on a dish? How does that play out on a street food walking tour? How do you gather those stories through food? And I would say that's, for those of you in the audience that are thinking about getting started, that's how you get started. Think about the stories that you want to tell, and how does that express itself in food?
There's our 40 dishes, each with an aid memoir of the story, how to pronounce it, what's involved in it. So everyone leaves our tour with that aid memoir.
That's
they
amazing.
Go home as our representatives talking about our tour through the food list we give them. Every food tour.
Sign me up, Neville. I'm coming. As soon as I can fly, I'll be there.
I think one of the benefits that both Japan and Vietnam have is traditionally, if you were to go to looking for yakitori, you go to the yakitori shop, or you go to, if you're looking for, anything else, it's not a case where you go to a Japanese restaurant and you have everything on on the menu in one place.
Right.
So therefore, it's it's natural for people to create a food safari scenario by going to try a different gyoza shop, or going to a pub and trying the different food there. So naturally, Vietnam is a little bit orientating that way as well, because you can go to one shop for banh cuon and you can go to another shop for banh sao, which is the Vietnamese pancake. And so, yeah, those sort of safari sort of journeys also work very well from my perspective when I'm conducting MICE or corporate groups or creating dine around scenarios with high-end travelers. Having an entree at one place, a main at another, and dessert at another to conclude is a really great way for people to experience multiple locations who are naturally very time poor. So,
and you can point out all the sites on the way. Like, as you're changing locations, it's also a sightseeing tour too, right? You can talk about this street or this alley or this building as a part of walking along to the next food stop.
That's right. And you can integrate so many, and this is also what I love about that side of creating food experiences like this, is that it does have a sustainable element to it. Because we touched on sustainability before, but it's a case where, in Cambodia, for example, one of my partners in Cambodia conducts a food culinary tour that is ushered, and guests travel between those restaurants on local tuk-tuks. Now, those tuk-tuk drivers are also English-speaking hosts who will talk about the location, talk about the destination, and like you said, Lauren, before, from a learning about the culture, but from a food point of view. So I think that there are many aspects that one can create when you're looking at creating a high-end experiential culinary experience that allows for guests to really immerse themselves within the destination and the culture. And heading back, these are the stakeholders. Now we're not talking just about the primary producers, the secondary, we're not talking about the chefs, but we're also talking about the people that work at the restaurants, the people who are selling the food, the people who are transporting guests between places as well. So that it really does become like an ecosystem of experts, all based around the introduction of food into these cultures.
And to tie it into something Eric was saying earlier about those local ambassadors, I have a quick story. I'll try to be really quick with this, but you may be surprised what happens in terms of other types of sustainability. So a problem we struggle with in Japan, I don't know if this is the case in Vietnam or not, but we have a very aging population. And so some of these traditional mom and pop shops or producers are aging out, and their kids, they either don't have kids that want to go into the industry, or their kids have moved away. So this may be the end of a line for a 200, 300-year-old specialist. And there was a great story of a local domestic tour showing candy producers in the Asakusa area of Tokyo, which was really famous 100 years ago for producing all kinds of hand molded candy. And the last manufacturer was about to close. He was going to retire. And a young local guy went on a tour and was introduced to that candy maker. And he said, look, I don't want this tradition to die. I've been trying to decide what to do as an entrepreneur. Teach me your craft. Let me join first as an employee, and then I'll raise money to become a stakeholder. And then when you retire, I'll try to buy you out of the business. And the family was so thrilled. And this tradition is carrying on because of empowering that local ambassador. So don't just think about those international travelers. What kinds of stories did the Vietnamese travelers or the local Asian regional travelers not know? That, some inspiration, some sustainable story will come out of that if you include all of those kinds of domestic folks as well. Neighborhood folks need to support each other,
Yeah, I take on board that succession planning is really important for people who are, developing their business and have created a big impact on the culinary scene, but simply by being the stars of what they do. But yeah, it's really important to think about the next generation and how we can groom that next generation to take over as well. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, speaking of Japan, there are a lot of Michelin star restaurants in Japan. And, a question from the group member, one of the audience, is saying, which came first? Is it the Michelin stars that brought people interested in Japanese cuisine, or was it the Japanese cuisine?
I would say Japanese. I would say Japanese cuisine and specialization, like you mentioned with Vietnam, that brought the Michelin inspectors and the foodies to Japan. Japan got recognition for something they were already doing. So they are highly specialized there, as you pointed out. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I think Michelin inspectors really respond to, that super specialized, very technical, very amazing, even from street food like yakitori all the way up to fine dining. The folks in Japan are obsessed with perfection, right? So I think that existed before Michelin came here, but the Michelin inspectors were quite surprised. And then we just have a massive volume of restaurants. Tokyo alone has 160,000 restaurants. So by proportion, it's not surprising that we have so many Michelin stars, but actually if you combine Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, we have the most in the world, more than Paris and New York.
Wow. Eric, would you say that is a path that Vietnam is yet to take, or Vietnam is on track for something like that in the next 10 years?
Are you asking if Vietnam is on the path to become Michelin capitals?
No, is on track to resemble Japan in the future with in that direction?
I think it could certainly happen. I think it'll take more than 10 years, though. I think the infrastructure in Japan is quite developed. It's a very population-dense country. They do transportation really well. And I've not been to Vietnam, but watched a lot of videos and talked to a lot of people who've been there, and of course talked to Neville as well. And it sounds like there's some things that need to be sorted out in Vietnam first before it can become that kind of destination. I mean, obviously people are going to be coming to the big cities where they can enjoy those nice experiences. But like we were saying before, people want to get out into rural areas too. There's a chef in Sweden, and he's a Michelin star chef, and his Fabriken is his restaurant, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you have to drive, you have to take a flight or a train to the town of Östersund, and then you have to drive for 2 hours, and it's like near the Norwegian-Swedish border in the middle of the forest somewhere. It just right. You have to know somebody who knows how to get there. And imagine tourists coming en masse to Vietnam who can't read the language, don't know where they're going, they can't ask directions. Their cell phones don't work. There's a cascade, a comedy of errors that could happen that could really backfire. So, but I think that if this all was done well, if product was developed in a way that people could feel safe to venture out into the hinterlands, how wonderful would that be? To venture alone or with your family, to get in a car and just drive and discover a village. But I think there's this fear as well, that even food-loving travelers have, that of the language and of the culture. We won't be able to communicate. We won't be able to find our way there. We won't be able to get back. We're going to get lost. We're going to get robbed. These are all things that we think about. And if we can't communicate, and I would venture to say that most Americans, Canadians, and Europeans coming to Vietnam don't speak Vietnamese. So it's a very real issue. And I think that there are many Vietnamese who do speak very good English, but probably not as many in the rural areas. So I think there's some development work that needs to be done first before Vietnam can rise to the same level where Japan is now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And in terms of having Vietnam, we have to consider as a developing country, whereas Japan is an already developed country. And so the infrastructure pre-exists. I guess at the end of the day, it keeps businesses like mine alive, where we are the experts that combine the experienced chef with a local guide, with the vehicle, with the transport, in order to create that overall, full package service that we offer international travelers who do not speak the language. So that's something that the DMCs can really jump on board if there are any DMC listeners out there.
It's a great reason to use tour operators and tourist guides. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. In terms of understanding, let's talk about the quality of food and understanding how local providers can boost the quality of the food and the experience that they can offer international travelers. Neville, what do you think about that perspective and how to improve the quality of food?
I started off by saying Vietnam has the freshest, healthiest, the most delicious foods in the world. I said I would be more confident eating what is known as street food, but that's a silly name, the food of the people, from people selling it, vending it in the street, than I would be of eating most restaurants in the world. These people are obsessed with health. Vietnamese never put anything in their mouth unless they know the health benefit. They'll pick up chopsticks at the most modest restaurants, and you'll see Vietnamese cleaning the chopsticks. They'll clean the food. They'll even clean the bowl. Our tour hosts go to street vendors, and even if the street vendors have got a clean bowl, our food tour hosts still clean the bowl. There is no problems about the quality of Vietnamese food. We have had so few, touch wood, people being sick on our food tour. By the way, we respect every one of the dietary requirements of our tour group. We go to great lengths to ensure that if someone has a peanut allergy or someone has any type of allergy, that we'll look after them. And they are obsessed. So the quality of food, in terms of the general healthiness of it, is without question. In terms of freshness, here's an interesting one. A concept in Vietnam still being introduced in Vietnam is a thing called refrigeration. No, we know about, no. People do not store like you do like people do in the West, food in the fridge. There's no such thing as leftovers. As soon as the meal's finished, thrown out. Rice? Oh, no way. As soon as the meal finished, the rice is thrown out. We keep the rice for fried rice or whatever else we do. But Vietnamese throw the food out. This is the healthiest food, and we have never, touch wood, and 30,000 guests, had a person come back with a food poisoning and that. And we're offering 40 dishes every day for the last 12 years. Come on, you tell me any restaurant anywhere in the world that can make that claim. Famous one sorry, I want to talk negative about restaurants in Denmark, but there is no restaurant that can claim that which we claim right now. We have had 2 situations where a peanut allergy has hit our tour. We're talking about 30,000 guests. The one we just couldn't deal with was one of our suppliers started separating the noodles with peanut oil. Peanut oil is the most expensive oil, and no one used peanut oil. But this day they separated the noodles with peanut oil. There was no control possible of our peer. But we do not have people getting sick from the food. Don't ask me about restaurants. I'm talking about a food tour. In the restaurants where the chef is responsible to minimize shrinkage, they keep food. Our people source the food from the local suppliers, from home kitchens, and we have the freshest, healthiest foods in the world. So in terms of quality of food, I will hold up the quality of the food of the locals here are higher than any other country in the world again. Japan, I'd say, I reckon we'd hold up against any food quality anywhere in the world. So there's the question, there's the answer, along with about the quality of Vietnamese food. How are we going? We're doing it better than anyone else in the world.
Mm. In terms of understanding quality, I mean, you need to benchmark quality with ratings. And, you know, like if there's a Michelin star rating or if there's another local rating, here in Vietnam, the Restaurant Association is working to develop a localized rating system. If there was such a system implemented, is that something that would improve the perception of quality within restaurants? I think Eric, you may be able to respond to this.
Well, I think the risk that you run is developing your own rating system that no one understands or recognizes. So you have different rating schemes around the world. In New Zealand, they used ferns for a while. You've seen forks, you've seen hats, you've seen wine glasses, and it all becomes a little silly. And you know, Google reviews, TripAdvisor, and so on. I think that the challenge is that not everyone has the same taste, and this goes into what we call psychoculinary profiling, which is a methodology that our association developed over 10 years ago. And you might go to a restaurant and say, wow, that was really bad. I really hated that. And then someone else went and said, no, that was amazing. I really liked it. And maybe you were expecting authentic, local, and organic, and instead they gave you gourmet, innovative, and trendy, right? And it just wasn't you. So the risk is, you know, asking people for ratings when, you know, people don't know who's doing those ratings. And then there's also the competition that will plant or seed bad reviews in there. So I don't know. I think that an internationally recognized rating system would be the better way to go, but I don't know. I would really have to have a look at what's being developed, and you know, it could be very well that it is successful, but I don't know. There's a lot of these systems in a lot of different countries around the world, and what happens is people land, they want to go out to eat, and they see, you know, 3 ducks on a menu. Well, they didn't even know that's a rating system, right? Or in New Zealand, 5 ferns. What does that mean? You know, so if people aren't familiar with the rating system, then they're not even going to know what it is. They won't pay attention to it.
Thanks for that, Eric. My final question to the panel is really quite a general one, and one that allows us all to look into the future. What do you all think is the best way to promote Vietnam more so as a culinary destination? What can we do? I might start with Lauren.
So I go back to those, you know, online, offline, international matsuris. Like, how can you talk to people that are already great promoters of Vietnamese food and get their stories out? How can you invite people to participate? We actually do online food experiences in my company. We started before COVID, but then really embraced it during COVID. And we talk a lot about food stories before people travel here. So what about working on some events for travelers that is an introduction to travel to Vietnam? Cooking classes online, I'm sure, are already happening from Vietnam. So embracing those kinds of things to prepare for after COVID would be great. I would love to see you guys really think about, you know, less like we were talking about earlier, less about competitors and more about how people can help each other. Get some panels together. You know, a great thing that would be amazing to come out of something like this Food Trucks experience would be, you know, 5 people from marketing and DMO, DMC, as a restaurateur, a tour guide company person, like get a producer, get a group of people together and say, like, yeah, what do we want to do to further promote the future of brand Vietnam in the culinary scene? I do think that it is a branding issue. I think you have a few dishes that are really well known around the world. But I think Vietnam has a very strong brand for adventure travel and for the art scene, but I'm not sure that the food scene is as much on the international thinking as it could be. So I would be doing everything focused on telling those stories. Just start working from that angle. And as you reach out to external media, find a great story about a fish sauce producer, like Neville was saying, or find a great story about a chef and try to drum up influencer media and traditional media around those stories. The more that awareness rises, then you'll get the thought leaders, the people that travel the world for food, the people that will go to the 3-hour away place in the middle of the woods in Denmark. They're going to write about it and tell people about it afterwards. So get those people with you on your groups where you take them out into the countryside and you provide transportation. Find a way for them to tell that story. Invite a group of really great foodie influencers to do a culinary tour of Vietnam when borders are reopened. You know, there's a lot of great things, I think, that can help get those stories out.
Okay, this I'd love to hear the answer to this question from Eric, because particularly for someone who's not traveled to Vietnam but has known many people to have been and experienced Vietnam itself. What do we need to make Vietnam more sexy for you to come over?
Well, I'm ready to come. I've been wanting to come for a long time, so you don't have to sell me on it. But I think that for food lovers, there's two things. First of all, you need a USP. So when people think about where to travel on, a food is such a motivator, and they're thinking about places in Southeast Asia, you know, they're thinking about Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines. And apart from those couple of iconic dishes that Lauren mentioned, they're not really able to articulate what is Vietnamese cuisine and how it's different from those other dishes. I think the Thai government has done a very good job of creating a lot of Thai restaurants around the world, and many Thai dishes are known. And I think people can speak a little bit more comfortably about what is in Thai food, or what you know, the components of Japanese food. But I think another thing that you could do is look at some iconic dishes. And I know that several years ago, the Indonesian government put together a list of 25 iconic Indonesian dishes. Now, unfortunately, they didn't do anything with it, but they did have this list. And I thought it was very clever, because it really put all of those dishes that you might see people eating, like the tempeh, I think they call it, the rice cone, you know, that they do there. They had all these dishes, and anyone who would be visiting could expect to try these dishes. And I think that would be something that you could look towards doing in Vietnam. Have 25 iconic dishes, no matter where you are in the country. You know, maybe there's 10 in the north and 15 in the south, or however you break it down. But dishes that people could look forward to that are not like other dishes in Thailand or Indonesia.
I think that would be great. I would totally love to come and do, you know, Eric's list from Neville's tour of 25 dishes that I have to try traveling around Vietnam. I think that's a great start. And that's a really easy starting place. So when we're talking about these big picture things, if you can get some stakeholders to define those dishes and start a promotion campaign around that, that's a really great first step.
And the people who make them, the faces behind the places.
Yep.
Yeah. Neville, would you agree with that?
Yes, I'm a self-confessed food trophy hunter. I'm a self-confessed food trophy. I want to find the best of the best wherever it is in the world, and in particular Vietnam. Now I'm up to 400, I guess around about 400 different dishes that I'd be able to introduce you to around this area of the best of the best and another thing. The real point about marketing is, the simplest part about marketing is a satisfied customer. There is no more effective way to market any product anywhere in the world than have a satisfied customer. 80% of our guests are from word of mouth. The other 20 are probably returnees and a few new ones. We're fairly busy. But the real point is, satisfied customers will be your best marketing anywhere, anytime, ever throughout the world. And we in Vietnam, we being the restaurant food service industry, have got a big responsibility for the marketing. We are all part of the marketing act. And to satisfy the customer is to do something very important in terms of the future of Vietnamese food, Vietnamese travel in general. But it really is the answer to it. And I add, we're about to finish, I add that one of my heroes, and probably a lot of your heroes, is a man by the way, well, was a man, God rest his soul, by the name of Anthony Bourdain. There's his book, his latest book, Anthony Bourdain. What is the photo? What's the drawing in right in the photo? Anthony Bourdain sitting at a street food restaurant in those little seats. He had the world to choose from. in terms of that image, or they have the world to choose from. What they choose? They choose Vietnam. I think we're on the way. I think we're on the way. We've got to start, and you, the restaurant industry, are the ones that are going to achieve it for us by telling the stories created from the theatre behind Vietnamese food. And there's a lot of theatre behind Vietnamese food. That's it.
Well, I think that was a really great way to conclude our session for panel 4 today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for my expert panel of culinary experts. It's been wonderful to hear all of your perspectives on how Vietnam can grow and improve the culinary scene within Vietnam as a destination, particularly on a gastronomic level. So thank you all. We've answered all of the questions that have come through from the audience as well. So it's been a wonderful session that we've had today. And once again, for all of the listeners out there, thank you for joining panel 4 today. So we'll say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Xin cảm ơn anh Lĩnh. Thank you, moderator Lĩnh Lê and all the panelists. Such a wonderful discussion. Thank you. Xin cảm ơn anh Lĩnh. Và các chuyên gia đã có phần trao đổi và chia sẻ về phát triển tiềm năng du lịch ẩm thực Việt Nam trong giai đoạn mới qua góc nhìn của những chuyên gia quốc tế. Thì hy vọng là các quý vị khán giả, đặc biệt là những chủ doanh nghiệp trong lĩnh vực nhà hàng ẩm thực sẽ có thêm nhiều cái thông tin để chúng ta tham khảo. Phải nói là ngày nay thì trải nghiệm của khách hàng đã là yếu tố được đặt lên hàng đầu, luôn là đặt lên hàng đầu. Và bắt đầu ngay cả trước khi khách đặt chân vào nhà hàng của bạn. Chính vì thế mà hiểu về khách hàng, dự đoán những gì họ sẽ làm tiếp theo và làm cho mỗi tương tác được cá nhân hóa sẽ càng trở nên quan trọng hơn nếu bạn muốn tăng khả năng cạnh tranh, lan tỏa cái bản sắc thương hiệu và cải thiện doanh thu cho nhà hàng của mình. Vậy thì sau đây mời quý vị khán giả chúng ta cùng đến phần chia sẻ của anh Huỳnh Quang Trung, cựu giám đốc kỹ thuật số tại The Coffee House, hiện tại là CEO của KaiPass Loyalty, với chủ đề rất là thiết thực, đó là thiết kế trải nghiệm khách hàng, thúc đẩy lợi nhuận gia tăng thông qua cá nhân hóa. Xin trân trọng kính mời anh Huỳnh Quang Trung.
Xin chào tất cả các quý khán giả và khách mời. Thì hôm nay chúng ta tham dự cái chương trình hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc trong ngành nhà hàng và ẩm thực, và chủ đề hôm nay của do ban tổ chức đưa ra trong bài chia sẻ của Trung là thiết kế trải nghiệm khách hàng và thúc đẩy lợi nhuận gia tăng thông qua cá nhân hóa. Thì đầu tiên Trung xin chia sẻ về bản thân mình. Trung thì background là dân làm công nghệ, có 5 năm tham gia vào vai trò giám đốc digital của The Coffee House trong từ những ngày đầu tiên của The Coffee House cho đến thời gian gần đây, và hiện tại thì Trung đang là CEO của ứng dụng KaiPass, ứng dụng giải quyết bài toán về loyalty và chăm sóc khách hàng dành cho các nhà bán lẻ và F&B của thị trường Việt Nam muốn đi vào luôn ở cái phần nội dung của việc triển khai trải nghiệm khách hàng. Thì ở đây đầu tiên mình sẽ giới thiệu về trải nghiệm cá nhân hóa và những ứng dụng của nó trên nền tảng online, bởi vì cái nền tảng online là cái nền tảng chúng ta vẫn thường xuyên nhìn thấy nhiều nhất. Và tiếp đến thì mình sẽ xem thử coi cái việc trải nghiệm cá nhân hóa này đã được ứng dụng trong ngành F&B như thế nào, và thực sự là nó sẽ đem lại những cái lợi ích gì. Và phần cuối cùng thì mình sẽ nói thêm về việc là những cái triển khai như thế nào và những cái lưu ý khi cần để triển khai cái hoạt động cá nhân hóa này. Thì hiện nay để mà cho nó ngắn gọn thì mình sẽ dùng từ tiếng Anh là personalization cho cái cụm từ trải nghiệm cá nhân hóa. Rồi, thì những năm trước thì tôi vẫn hay thường ghé qua một cái quán cà phê ở ngay chỗ 42 Hồ Văn Rùa, rất nhiều năm, đến cả cũng phải 5-6 năm ghé qua đây. Thì ở đây có một bạn nhân viên rất là thân thiện, bạn đó nhớ mặt mình lúc nào mỗi lần mình tới, bạn đó đều họ gọi anh Trung cà phê phải không, là đem ngay một ly cà phê. Thì cái việc mà một bạn nhân viên bạn làm được như vậy tạo cho mình một cái cảm giác là thân thuộc, rất thoải mái khi đến, và nó thành một cái thói quen mình luôn. Sau đến khi đó, sau một thời gian thì tôi có tham gia gia nhập vào The Coffee House, và khi mà gia nhập vào The Coffee House thì tôi rất muốn đem cái trải nghiệm này đến cho một chuỗi cà phê với quy mô gần 100 quán, 3.000 nhân viên. Và thực sự với cái số lượng đó thì cái tỷ lệ nhân viên ra vô hàng tháng cũng rất là đông. Thì đây sẽ là một cái thử thách rất là lớn, bởi vì chúng ta không thể nào trông chờ vào trí nhớ của một vài nhân viên cửa hàng mà có thể là tạo ra được một cái trải nghiệm được cá nhân hóa cho khách hàng và xuyên suốt toàn hệ thống như thế này. Ở The Coffee House thì thật sự cái việc ứng dụng công nghệ trong vận hành và xây dựng nền tảng dữ liệu khách hàng đó là một viên gạch đầu tiên để tạo điều kiện cho ứng dụng cá nhân hóa trong quy mô lớn trong nhiều hoạt động, của hệ thống, từ vận hành đến marketing đến phát triển thị trường, tìm mặt bằng, kể cả bộ phận R&D để phát triển ra những các món sản phẩm mới. Thì ứng dụng cá nhân hóa, ứng dụng data khách hàng giúp cho The Coffee House có thể giải quyết việc này trên một cái quy mô rất là lớn. Thì cái việc ứng dụng công nghệ để nâng cao và gia tăng khách hàng thì thực sự nó không phải là một cái khái niệm rất là mới mẻ. Nó được ứng dụng rất nhiều trong các cái lĩnh vực trực tuyến. Thì mình có thể thấy như Amazon khi mà họ phân tích lịch sử đặt hàng của khách hàng và tiếp theo họ đề xuất cái cuốn sách tiếp theo hay món hàng tiếp theo mà khách hàng nên mua khi mà đang ở trong giỏ hàng, đang ở trong trang web của Amazon. Bản thân cá nhân tôi thì bây giờ là tôi hoàn toàn phụ thuộc vào cái việc cái đề xuất của Netflix khi mà mình muốn xem phim gì trên Netflix. Và người ta có một cái câu nói rằng là không có Netflix của ai giống Netflix của ai cả. Mỗi một cái Netflix đều được cá nhân hóa dựa trên cái thói quen xem phim, và tất cả những cái đó dựa trên cái việc là chúng ta xem phim gì, chúng ta dừng xem phim gì, sau bao lâu, rồi chúng ta tìm kiếm cái gì, tiếp vào những cái title nào, thì những cái việc đó đều được phân tích lại để mà cuối cùng Netflix tạo ra được một cái hệ thống recommend gợi ý được cho người xem về cái nội dung cần xem tiếp. Chúng ta thấy là việc đó được ứng dụng rồi. Hôm nay ở cái khuôn khổ ngày hôm nay thì mình phải xem lại coi hiện tại trong ngành F&B, hospitality của mình thì thực sự đã được ứng dụng như thế nào. Có một cái điều rất là ngạc nhiên là ra trong ngành online, trong ngành quảng cáo đã được đầu tư rất nhiều rồi, nhưng trong ngành F&B thực sự là đã rất ít nỗ lực được thực hiện để đem lại cái trải nghiệm cá nhân hóa. Rất nhiều bên, rất nhiều công ty đều có cái mong muốn thu thập data, mong muốn ứng dụng nó, nhưng mà để thực sự đem về trải nghiệm cá nhân hóa thì thực sự là chưa có ứng dụng nhiều để mà tạo ra được cái trải nghiệm cho khách hàng dùng bữa. Đa số các công nghệ thường được ứng dụng để tối ưu hóa việc quảng cáo nhiều hơn, làm tăng doanh số bán hàng, và không phải là một cái công cụ để mà hướng tới việc trải nghiệm của khách hàng. Để bắt đầu thì phải hiểu được là personalization là gì. Personalization thì tiếng Việt là cá nhân hóa trải nghiệm, nghĩa là thiết kế, sản xuất các dịch vụ, sản phẩm phù hợp với nhu cầu cá nhân tại mỗi thời điểm nhất định. Bạn vẫn thấy cái personalization trong các hoạt động marketing và quảng cáo email, quảng cáo hướng mục tiêu, retargeting. Mà mỗi lần mình vào một cái trang nào đó thì thường sẽ thấy theo sau, thì đó là một phần của personalization. Và các cái tỷ lệ chuyển đổi trên các cái chiến dịch này có cái mức độ chuyển đổi rất là cao, đem hiệu quả rất là lớn. Nhưng thực sự để mà ứng dụng về trong các cái chuỗi F&B, với các chuỗi hospitality hay nhà hàng thì chưa có quá nhiều cái ứng dụng. Tôi đưa một ví dụ tại The Coffee House có ứng dụng một số cái thành quả của việc này thông qua cái việc thu thập dữ liệu từ thời gian sử dụng wifi, lịch sử mua hàng, và phân tích được một số thói quen của khách hàng. Và một nhóm khách hàng được gọi là nhóm người gọi là nhóm freelancer nha, là những người mà họ xem với cà phê như làm việc, họ đến cà phê họ làm việc rất là lâu, họ cần phải làm tốt. Thì thông qua những cái phân tích thì mình thấy được một thứ là nhóm khách hàng này có cái mật độ cao tại một số khu vực, từ trường học, từ một số khu dân cư, có cái độ tuổi trẻ. Cái thói quen họ thường hay uống một thứ là thứ uống cà phê sữa đá, và dành 3 đến 4 giờ một ngày tại quán. Thường đó khoảng từ 8 giờ sáng tới 12 giờ trưa, và buổi trưa họ đi ăn trưa, đi gặp gỡ khách hàng ở đối tác. Thường là vậy. Và gần như là liên tục các ngày trong tuần, 5-6 ngày một tuần, tần suất rất lớn. Nhóm này có một cái nhu cầu sử dụng wifi rất là lớn, bởi họ làm việc mà họ không hài lòng khi hệ thống wifi bị quá tải. Việc này được ghi nhận thông qua cái cách mà họ feedback, họ complain lại thông qua trên ứng dụng của The Coffee House. Với nhiều chuyên gia thì nếu họ nhìn vào cái tần suất này, cái thời gian này, thì các chuyên gia trong ngành sẽ nhận định rằng đây là đặc biệt là chuyên gia về tài chính, nhóm này sẽ không đem lại hiệu quả cao về tài chính vì họ ngồi quá lâu và họ dùng ít. Tại The Coffee House thì mình ứng dụng cái phân tích về data, ứng dụng về LTV, gọi là lifetime value khách hàng. The Coffee House nhận ra rằng đây là một nhóm khách hàng có giá trị bởi vì họ đóng góp một cái số lượng rất lớn với một cái thời gian dài, tần suất rất cao tại cửa hàng và đem lại một cái nguồn doanh thu rất là ổn định cho The Coffee House. Do đó đây là nhóm khách hàng này được coi là nhóm khách hàng rất quan trọng và The Coffee House quyết tâm tạo ra cái trải nghiệm tối ưu nhất cho họ với hàng loạt các cải tiến và bố trí chỗ ngồi, có cái bảng đồng, ổ cắm điện, nhiều ổ cắm điện hơn, hệ thống wifi được nâng cấp, những nơi kéo tới 2-3 đường wifi giống như một siêu thị luôn. Ngoài ra về sản phẩm thì tạo ra cái món đá cà phê, tức là cái viên đá mình viên cà phê mình đâm đá lại, thì khi pha cà phê xong mình bỏ cái viên đá vô, thì lúc đó khi mà đá tan chảy ra thì không có nghĩa là cái cà phê không bị rải đi, thì cái cách này nó giúp cho cà phê giữ vị lâu hơn, phục vụ cho cái nhóm khách hàng sẵn sàng ngồi lâu. Thì đây là một ví dụ cho thấy rằng là việc ứng dụng dữ liệu và mass personalization, tức là cái việc cá nhân hóa ở một cái quy mô rộng đi vào hoạt động và đem hiệu quả, bởi vì The Coffee House giữ chân được cái nhóm khách hàng này khá là ổn định. Chúng ta đã chia sẻ ở đây thì chúng ta thấy rằng là personalization là gì và nó đang ở đâu trong cái hoạt động của doanh nghiệp mà F&B cũng như là doanh nghiệp hospitality. Thì trong khuôn khổ ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi sẽ không đi quá sâu vào việc là làm như thế nào, sẽ tập trung vào những cái chia sẻ về một số cái hiện tượng, một số cái hiệu quả để mà chúng ta có một cái suy nghĩ để bắt đầu và có một cái khái niệm sâu hơn về việc ứng dụng nó. Thì trong cái ngành F&B này, việc ứng dụng được cái personalization nó sẽ giúp cho rất nhiều, và trong tất cả các business thì việc ứng dụng đem lại hiệu quả cuối cùng vẫn là việc có tăng được lợi nhuận của hoạt động kinh doanh hay không. Thì việc ứng dụng được personalization giúp cho ta tăng được cái chất lượng dịch vụ dành cho khách hàng. Thì đối với chất lượng dịch vụ doanh nghiệp F&B thì đánh giá xoay quanh việc là cái trải nghiệm của khách hàng có được tốt hay không, và cá nhân hóa là cái chìa khóa giúp cho doanh nghiệp có một cái kết nối với khách hàng cách sâu sắc hơn. Ví dụ như nhân viên giao tiếp khách hàng bằng tên riêng, thông qua cái việc khách hàng lúc mà order thì nhân viên cũng biết được lịch sử mua sắm của khách hàng, và hệ thống cũng có thể recommend cho nhân viên xem là món nào ưa thích nhất của khách hàng nên giới thiệu cho khách, cắt ngắn thời gian đặt hàng đi và làm cho khách hàng cảm thấy họ được chăm sóc. Thì cái đồng thời họ cũng có thể đưa ra được một số cái khuyến mãi, mình gọi là upsell đi, phù hợp với lại cái thói quen tiêu dùng của khách hàng hơn là chúng ta giới thiệu một cách đại trà những sản phẩm cho khách hàng. Thì việc này giúp cho giảm được cái thời gian vận hành thao tác và độ phức tạp của nhân viên, và chắc chắn tăng sự hài lòng của khách hàng cảm thấy được chào đón, ghi nhận nó phải tốt hơn, và từ đó doanh thu sẽ tăng lên, upsell được tốt hơn, và như vậy tạo cho việc khách hàng sẽ quay lại nhiều hơn. Ứng dụng cá nhân hóa là một cái thứ mà tôi nghĩ rằng, tôi tin rằng là nó sẽ đem lại cái hiệu quả rất là lâu dài cho doanh nghiệp. Nó không phải là ngày 1, ngày 2. Điều này nó tạo nên câu chuyện về loyalty, câu chuyện về độ trung thành của khách hàng. Trong rất nhiều cái hoạt động, các doanh nghiệp họ làm cái chương trình khách hàng thân thiết thì họ đều chưa phân biệt được rõ ràng là reward là thưởng quà tặng với việc là làm loyalty. Thì đối với các hoạt động khách hàng thân thiết thì bình thường người vẫn nhìn nghe chuyện là tôi tặng gì cho khách hàng hơn là câu chuyện thực sự chúng ta ứng dụng những cái thành quả của việc là khách hàng cung cấp, chia sẻ cái thói quen tiêu dùng của mình để mà chúng ta phục vụ tốt hơn, thì đó mới là câu chuyện loyalty. Thì qua đó khi xây dựng được loyalty rồi và xây dựng được lòng trung thành thì chúng ta có được tăng được doanh thu, được tần số khách hàng quay lại tốt hơn, tăng được doanh thu lâu dài và độ gắn kết với thương hiệu ổn định hơn rất nhiều. Bên cạnh đó, cái việc mà chúng ta như nêu ở trên thì chúng ta thấy rằng là cái việc người phục vụ, người nhân viên hoàn toàn có thể dễ dàng chăm sóc khách hàng tốt hơn, bớt cái thời gian họ dành cho cái việc chăm sóc, việc trao đổi những cái không cần thiết với khách hàng, mà dành nhiều thời gian hơn vào làm chuyên môn về phục vụ cho khách hàng. Thì lúc đó chúng ta thấy rằng cái việc đào tạo nhân viên nó sẽ được tinh giản, và để một cái doanh nghiệp có thể scale được, phát triển nó được 100-200 cửa hàng một năm thì việc đào tạo nhân viên nó phải được đơn giản hóa, phải được gần như là số hóa tất cả những hoạt động đó, và nhanh chóng chúng ta có thể đưa một nhân viên mới đi ra mặt trận để phục vụ khách hàng. Từ đó chúng ta sẽ giảm được cái chi phí vận hành. Không chỉ ở những công đoạn vận hành, câu chuyện về personalization này có thể giúp được chúng ta là tối ưu được cái chi phí marketing. Việc tối ưu chi phí marketing đây không nghĩa rằng chúng ta chi ít hơn cho marketing, mà chúng ta sẽ chi chính xác hơn cho marketing, và cái chi phí cho marketing này sẽ đem lại hiệu quả cao hơn so với lại việc chúng ta đang làm những cái chương trình khuyến mãi, đưa ra những cái sản phẩm quà tặng một cách đại trà. Bình thường mọi người vẫn thấy là các cái nhà hàng, các cái quán ăn vẫn thường hay làm những cái chương trình, cái bộ marketing là chương trình là bao swag coupon, những voucher bao swag, để mà sau khi khách hàng ăn một lần thì mình đưa voucher để khách hàng quay lại thứ hai. Những nghiên cứu cho thấy rằng đó là hơn 70% số voucher này được gửi đi mà không hề quay lại. Trong số 20% voucher này được gửi đi thì những người sử dụng là những người thực sự họ không cần voucher để họ quay lại, họ sẵn sàng quay lại nhưng họ không cần voucher. Nhưng mình đã cho voucher rồi họ vẫn xài. Về bản chất như vậy, đây nó sẽ là một cái phần chi phí mất đi, lẽ ra chúng ta phải nhận được. Do đó từ đó thấy là việc triển khai cái nhìn giảm giá đại trà thực sự làm gia tăng chi phí marketing không đáng có, và chi phí này nếu được hướng đến đúng nhóm đối tượng thì hiệu quả thực sự là sẽ rất khác biệt cả về bottom line lẫn về mặt top line. Các doanh nghiệp cần hiểu rõ hơn về khách hàng mục tiêu của mình để họ có thể cá nhân hóa hoạt động marketing một cách chính xác hơn. Điều này được tóm gọn trong nguyên tắc 4D: đúng đối tượng, đúng khách hàng, đúng thời điểm và đúng kênh. Như trên hình mọi người thấy là một cái ví dụ về một cái chiến dịch giới thiệu cái món mới của The Coffee House. Thì ở đây có chia khách hàng thành nhiều cái nhóm hành vi khác nhau. Nhóm khách hàng mà thích đi theo nhóm khách hàng có mức độ chi tiêu cao và uống cà phê, nhóm khách hàng chi tiêu cao và uống trà đào, và cái nhóm còn lại là nhóm mà sẽ bị ảnh hưởng bởi việc là chúng ta có khuyến mại hay không. Thì với 4 nhóm này thì mình có đưa ra 4 cái thông điệp, hình ảnh cũng như là các cái gọi là cái call to action, những cái nút bấm khác nhau tùy theo cái để mà kích thích được cái hiệu quả của cái chương trình này. Và chương trình này, một cái chương trình được customize, được gọi là được làm tỉ mỉ như thế này, đem lại những cái tỷ lệ chuyển đổi thực sự là cao nhất trong tất cả những hoạt động so với lại cái chương trình khác, chương trình làm đại trà. Và từ đó chúng ta thấy được rằng nếu chúng ta ứng dụng tốt dữ liệu và cá nhân hóa vào các hoạt động marketing thì chúng ta sẽ giảm được cái chi marketing và đem lại nó hiệu quả rất lớn. Đối với tất cả những cái hoạt động kể trên thì mình có thể tổng kết lại. Nếu mà một cái hoạt động nó giảm được chi phí vận hành, giảm được chi phí tăng được doanh thu, giảm được chi phí marketing thì thực sự ảnh hưởng ngay đến lợi nhuận, và nó làm tăng rất nhiều lợi nhuận cuối cùng của doanh nghiệp. Tổng kết lại thì việc cá nhân hóa này cần được ứng dụng trong tất cả các cái điệp chạm của khách hàng, trong ứng dụng của chúng ta, trong online, trong website, tại cửa hàng với chúng ta, tất cả những điệp chạm với khách hàng, từ quầy tính tiền cho đến bàn phục vụ, và đưa ra tất cả những cái dựa trên các cái gì đã mua quá khứ, cung cấp những cái hoạt động tiếp thị đơn giản nhưng phù hợp hữu ích. Và các nghiên cứu chỉ ra rằng những cái doanh thu này nó tăng trưởng đâu đó đến từ 10 đến 30% khi chúng ta ứng dụng tốt tất cả những hoạt động này. Personalization là một công cụ mạnh mẽ cho cả F&B và hospitality, nhưng cũng là một cái công cụ không hề dễ dàng để triển khai cái hành động được. Mass personality đòi hỏi một cái tư duy thay đổi, chuyển đổi số và quyết tâm thực hiện từ ban lãnh đạo doanh nghiệp với mục tiêu là trải nghiệm khách hàng là trung tâm. Trước tiên được triển khai cá nhân hóa từ lộ trình mục tiêu rõ ràng để mang đến cho khách hàng những cái trải nghiệm tuyệt vời. Từ cá nhân hóa, các thương hiệu cần có một cái giai đoạn gọi là giai đoạn thu thập dữ liệu, tạo ra hồ sơ khách hàng, các thông tin ở tất cả những cái đầu mối mà chúng ta có thể thu thập được từ khách hàng trên một cái quy mô lớn mà chúng ta có thể gọi là big data. Sau đó dựa trên những dữ liệu thu thập được các phân tích này, chúng ta phải đánh dấu, label, mã hóa, tạo ra các hồ sơ, và từ đó kết nối đến tất cả các điểm chạm của khách hàng trên cái hành trình trải nghiệm của mình. Thương hiệu ở trên The Coffee House mà tôi đã từng lấy ví dụ ở trên thì đã thúc đẩy sự thay đổi và tăng trưởng này trong suốt 6 năm. Từ những ngày đầu tiên, đó là một cái rất là hiếm gặp trong thị trường này. để cái thời gian này thực sự nó không phải là một cái thời gian dễ dàng, mà có những giai đoạn mọi người cũng từng đặt câu hỏi về việc là chúng ta đầu tư như vậy thực sự đem lại lợi ích gì, có xứng đáng hay không. Với sự quyết tâm thì tất cả những thứ từ cơ sở hạ tầng cho việc thu thập dữ liệu đến các công cụ và thay đổi thống nhất từ các bộ phận đến vận hành tại cửa hàng của khách hàng, giúp cho cái kết quả của việc ứng dụng dữ liệu này thực sự là đem lại giá trị. Nhưng đứng ở góc độ người tiêu dùng thì cá nhân hóa vẫn là một cái trải nghiệm khác biệt của doanh nghiệp, và cũng là con dao hai lưỡi, bởi vì nó còn liên quan đến một vấn đề mà thực sự gần đây mọi thứ nó đang có rất nhiều bên quan tâm, là vấn đề quyền riêng tư của khách hàng. Và để giải quyết chuyện này, chúng ta cần có một sự minh bạch cũng như là một khả năng bảo đảm và kiểm soát được cái tính bảo mật của dữ liệu và quyền riêng tư của khách hàng. Trong một báo cáo gần đây của Formation.ai có tựa đề là lòng trung thành với thương hiệu năm 2020, thì nó cho thấy rằng đó là nhu cầu cá nhân hóa chiếm 81% trong số 2.000 người tiêu dùng trong dõi ý kiến. Họ sẵn sàng cung cấp thông tin cá nhân cơ bản để được đổi lấy cái trải nghiệm tốt hơn. Trong đó 28% cực kỳ sẵn lòng cung cấp thông tin. Như vậy cho thấy rằng là khách hàng rất sẵn sàng giúp cho doanh nghiệp có thể chăm sóc mình tốt hơn. Nhưng báo cáo cũng cho thấy rằng 83% người tiêu dùng sẵn sàng chia sẻ dữ liệu của họ nhiều hơn nữa nếu doanh nghiệp họ đang chia sẻ có sự minh bạch và cung cấp rõ ràng cách họ sẽ sử dụng dữ liệu đó. Ở trong thời đại bảo mật dữ liệu, mọi người không ngại chia sẻ thông tin cá nhân, nhưng chỉ khi họ đồng ý làm điều đó một cách tự nguyện, và chỉ khi họ biết họ sẽ được sử dụng nó như thế nào. Một ví dụ gần đây mình thấy là Facebook. Trên bìa tạp chí Time mới nhất vừa được phát hành thì chân dung của Mark Zuckerberg có dán một cái biểu tượng là xóa Facebook với hai tùy chọn hủy hoặc xóa. Facebook đang hứng chịu một cái chỉ trích rất là lớn từ phía dư luận sau và bê bối từ việc thu thập dữ liệu thông tin cá nhân người dùng, phát tán tin giả, phát tán nội dung thù hận và rất nhiều thứ liên quan đến việc là Facebook đang ứng dụng quá nhiều cái thông tin thu thập từ người dùng để tạo nên những cái hoạt động mà có thể ảnh hưởng đến tính riêng tư cũng như rằng tâm lý tiêu dùng, đặc biệt là đối với trẻ em. Thì điều này chúng ta thấy rằng đây sẽ là một con dao hai lưỡi, bởi vì khi chúng ta sẵn sàng chơi với cuộc chơi này thì nếu chơi không khéo, chúng ta không làm tốt, thị trường hoàn toàn có thể backfire, phản hồi ngược lại những cái nỗ lực của chúng ta. Với những hai cái khó khăn đó, nó vẫn còn cái cuối cùng nữa, rằng khi chúng ta có data, khi chúng ta làm tốt câu chuyện bảo mật dữ liệu khách hàng sẵn sàng chia sẻ dữ liệu rồi, thì việc chúng ta ứng dụng được cái dữ liệu này, được cái thành quả này vào việc cá nhân hóa các cái trải nghiệm của khách hàng lại là một thử thách cũng không hề nhỏ. Hiện nay data ở rất nhiều nơi chúng ta đều có thể collect được, để thu thập được, không kênh nào, không có quá nhiều sự liên kết giữa kênh này data với nhau, và không dễ dàng gì để những cái công nghệ truyền thống có thể làm được việc này. Các thương hiệu đều dành rất nhiều thời gian để cố gắng kết nối lại với nhau. Bản thân các cái dữ liệu về đặt hàng online, đặt hàng trực tuyến, tiếp chuột vào website, xem notification trên Facebook, đó là một cái nhóm dữ liệu khác. Rồi làm sao để liên kết được với cái việc là người đặt hàng online, người click online đó có đến cửa hàng hay không, mua hàng như thế nào, và chúng ta có thể đem lại cái mối quan tâm mà khách hàng đã tìm kiếm online đó mà vào cái việc gợi ý tại cửa hàng hay không. Thì đây là một cái thử cũng không hề đơn giản đối với việc triển khai cá nhân hóa của khách hàng. Điều này khiến cho các doanh nghiệp cần phải tạo nên những cái hệ thống tạm gọi là CDP, Customer Data Platform, từ đó tập trung rất nhiều dữ liệu lại và tìm cách kết nối với nhau. và nó đầu tư và nó đòi hỏi những khoản đầu tư rất là lớn, rất là chuyên nghiệp và cần cái đội ngũ kỹ sư cũng có rất nhiều kinh nghiệm ở đây. Và các doanh nghiệp lớn như McDonald's chẳng hạn gần đây đã công bố một tin tức là việc mua lại Dynamic Yield với trị giá 300 triệu đô la. Mà đây là một công ty khởi nghiệp tập trung vào việc tạo ra dữ liệu và các thuật toán dựa trên sở thích cá nhân để thúc đẩy quyết định mua hàng. Thì điều này mình thấy rằng đó là một công ty F&B truyền thống như trước giờ, họ thực sự là rất quan tâm, họ sẵn sàng, họ đầu tư 300 triệu đô la để nâng cao cái năng lực kết nối, tạo ra dữ liệu khách hàng cá nhân và đưa vào cái việc đó ứng dụng cải thiện. Và chắc chắn rằng đây là một việc để dự đoán cải thiện khách hàng và cải thiện cái lợi nhuận của mình. Ứng dụng personalization là một cái hoạt động rất là phức tạp, rất là cần có sự đầu tư nhiều đến cả trăm triệu đô la như là McDonald's. Thì chúng ta phải quay lại hỏi rằng là có cách nào đó để cho các cái doanh nghiệp nhỏ và vừa, chúng ta những chủ nhà hàng ở quy mô trung bình có thể làm tốt được việc này để mà đem lại trải nghiệm tốt hơn cho khách hàng của mình, cũng như là tạo ra những cái lợi thế cạnh tranh tốt hơn. Thì với cái mục tiêu như vậy thì tôi xây dựng nên nền tảng KPass. KPass là một ứng dụng dành cho người dùng cuối cùng, và cũng là một cái nền tảng giúp cho các cái doanh nghiệp có thể chăm sóc được khách hàng của mình tốt hơn bằng cách là tạo nên các cái chương trình khách hàng thân thiết, thẻ thành viên trên nền tảng KPass, và cung cấp hệ thống cửa hàng quà tặng để cho khách hàng có thể đổi quà thông qua sau khi mua sắm và giao dịch tại các cái đối tác ở trên nền tảng của KPass. KPass sẽ giúp cho các doanh nghiệp tạo được cái mối quan hệ và kết nối với khách hàng của mình, và có các công cụ để phân tích dữ liệu và giúp cho các đối tác xây dựng nên mối quan hệ sâu sắc và cơ sở dữ liệu tốt hơn về khách hàng của mình. KPass cũng có thể tích hợp được vào các cái hệ thống, các cái nền tảng khác như là máy bán hàng, như là website, để giúp cho việc cá nhân hóa các hoạt động này được vươn đến, được chạm đến tất cả các cái touch point của khách hàng. Đến đây chúng ta cho chung được đưa ra phần kết luận cho cái buổi chia sẻ ngày hôm nay. Thì chúng ta thấy rằng là cá nhân hóa là không phải là một cái lựa chọn dành riêng cho dân marketing. Điều này nó thành một cái ứng dụng rất là quan trọng trong mọi phương diện của vận hành kinh doanh, và nó tạo nên một cái trải nghiệm tuyệt vời cho khách hàng. Từ đó chúng ta có thể tạo ra được những cái sản phẩm dịch vụ riêng biệt cho từng nhóm khách hàng và tăng được cái sự gắn kết, đem lại cái lợi nhuận cho doanh nghiệp của mình. Và những việc này giúp cho hoạt động kinh doanh chúng ta trở nên cạnh tranh hơn, và chắc chắn rằng nó sẽ giúp cho mình có thể duy trì ổn định và đứng vững trước những biến cố của thị trường, nhất là trong thời buổi Covid hiện nay. Xin mời mọi người đã theo dõi.
Dạ vâng, xin được một lần nữa xin cảm ơn anh Huỳnh Quang Trung đã chia sẻ về chủ đề thiết kế trải nghiệm khách hàng, thúc đẩy lợi nhuận gia tăng thông qua cá nhân hóa, rất thú vị và bổ ích. Kính thưa quý vị khán giả, để tạo ra những cơ hội hấp dẫn trong việc phát triển chuỗi cũng như là đưa thương hiệu vươn tầm quốc tế, thì đòi hỏi chúng ta nhận thức được xu hướng thực phẩm và đồ uống trên thế giới, từ đó ứng dụng hiệu quả Operational Excellence trong doanh nghiệp nhà hàng ẩm thực. Sau đây thì mời quý vị khán giả chúng ta cùng lắng nghe phần chia sẻ từ ông Albert Kong, CEO Managing Director của Asia Wide Franchise Consultants Asia Wide Franchise, với chủ đề Being aware of food and beverage trend in the world so as to achieve growth and operational excellence. So please welcome Mr. Albert Kong, CEO Managing Director at Asia Wide Franchise Consultants Asia Wide Franchise, for this presentation, please.
Very quick introduction on myself. My name is Albert Kong. I've been doing franchise consulting for close to 33 years. Over the last 33 years, my team and I, we have helped close to 1,400 companies all over Asia to build their franchise system and to help them to even look for franchisees. My company also published a bilingual English-Chinese franchise magazine called Asia Franchise and Business Opportunities. We are very active. We go to all the franchise shows, including the one in Ho Chi Minh City and even the cafe show in Hanoi. We have built a network of almost 80 people in almost 60 countries. So more about me and my company, you can find it in LinkedIn or our website. So without further ado, I will now begin to share with you this presentation entitled Being Aware of Food and Beverage Trends in the World so as to achieve growth and operational excellence. Now, I want to start by saying that although there are all sorts of trends, and you will also see me sharing with you trends, but just be careful that not everything that is successful in one country will automatically be successful in another country, right? So, for example, pork dishes are very popular, in Southeast Asia, including even Vietnam, right? But no matter how popular and how famous and how tasty, that pork concept restaurant will not work in the Middle East, right? Because they don't eat pork, right? So this is just one example. Another example will be, for example, very, very sweet dessert, okay? Very, very sweet dessert, let's say from Japan. For them to not adjust the sweetness and they try to sell, let's say in Hong Kong, or even Singapore, it may not work unless they adjust the sweetness, right? So because every culture is different, and consumers, their habit, and their perception of what is too sweet, what is not sweet enough, is also different. Okay, so this is the beginning. Now, I just want to show another example. For example, this very popular restaurant in Taiwan. Okay, it came to Singapore for barely 2 years, and they have to close shop because a lot of Singaporeans find that it's not funny that having to eat their meals in a place where all the chairs look like toilet bowls, even the tables, right? But it's popular in Taiwan. So this is another example, right? So you need to be very careful, even if you are very innovative, right? Another example here, I purposely put these 3 brands because they all came to Singapore and they failed. Hardee's is one. Hardee's, as you know, they also have Carl's Jr., right? But the franchisee, when they first came to Singapore, they only had 1 outlet, and then McDonald's was opening very quickly, and McDonald's was able to get economies of scale. So everything for McDonald's is cheaper than just 1 outlet Hardee's, so they failed. Taco Bell's came to Singapore, and even though they co-branded with their own companies, Pizza Hut, or even KFC, because they all belong to Yum, which is a huge company in America. But it failed because Taco Bell, as you are aware, is Tex-Mex food, meaning it's Texas, Mexico kind of food. So, a lot of ground beef, a lot of salsa, and, and then the burritos. So Singaporeans could not, at that time, adapt to it. Of course, now, a few years later, the young people in Singapore are more adventurous. And after they've traveled to, many parts of America, especially in the California, Texas area, and quite a lot of them have been to Mexico. So now, if Taco Bell comes back, I think they have a chance. So you must also look at the timing, of the entry of your food to that country. Another failure was Wendy's. Wendy's, again, like Hardee's, they couldn't compete with the other fast food companies. And they only had 2-3 outlets. And then, very quickly, the novelty and, people just feel there is nothing. And so they gave it up. Yeah. So Wendy's had to close. Right. Now, this is just a comment from, this person who do a lot of surveys on trends. So I will go into detail as to the trends that I have observed. Of course, all the trends that I'm sharing with you are just examples. There are other more trends, but those that I'm sharing with you are the more pertinent ones in my mind. So one, clearly, is food safety. I think everybody knows that even if the COVID-19 pandemic is over, food safety will be very important in F&B business. Nobody wants to get a stomach ache. Nobody wants to throw out all the food they have consumed and paid for, right? So even in Singapore, the government gives funding up to 95% for restaurants to send their staff to go for, food safety courses, right? And the second trend is about transparency. I think very clear. People are more and more particular about where your ingredients come from. They want to make sure that you are a trustworthy food company and not put coloring, artificial coloring or flavors that might have bad effects on your health. And as we know that as people are more and more educated now, if you read a lot of reports now, even banks, and government agencies talk about this thing called ESG, which has to do with sustainability. E having to do with environment, S having to do with just your social responsibility, G having to do your governance, right? So the more transparent you are, the more people feel that you are trustworthy, then the more customers you get and the more loyal they are with you. Now, another trend is convenience. I think very strangely, as the world becomes more and more sophisticated, people become more and more, impatient. They want things very fast. So I put two examples here. For example, even Taco Bell, they actually even came up with a double-decker drive-through, so that it's very convenient for people to even buy their food. Okay, like I'm sure it also is the same in Vietnam. KFC Singapore, they actually let people, use their mobile phone, order, then tell them what time they're coming, and then they just come and pick it up. And of course, the payment is all done already. So fast, convenient, no fast, right? The one is FAST fast. The no fast is FUSS fast, right? So that means it's very easy and it's an enjoyable thing, right? Here I share also with you, again, I talk about Yum. As I said before, Yum has got Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell. They make it so convenient that even customers can order steaks, beef steaks, and collect them, because they know that sometimes, consumers, they want variety. So they say, since you have a website and I'm ordering this and that, can I also order steak from you? So Yum is launching new products and packaged foods, because more and more people are ordering from home and they're too lazy to go to the restaurant. So again, convenience, very important. Another trend is plant-based food. So I've showed an example here. Just in Singapore alone, there are so many reports about all sorts of, food manufacturers and all sorts of restaurants all beginning to sell plant-based beef, plant-based chicken, So for example here, you can see that Yum China, again, like I said, they have many brands, including KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. They also have Xiao Fei Yang, which is a hot pot restaurant, very famous one, right? And then Burger King, Taco Bell. They're all into plant-based and vegetarian food because people are, now very aware that, cows, they emit a lot of air, when they burp or when they, do whatever other things, to get rid of air, right? So you can see, Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, they are all selling plant-based beef and chicken, yeah? Another trend to take note of course, very obvious to everyone, is technological innovation, okay? Again, the Singapore government actually has all sorts of grants, I'm sure many other governments also, to encourage, enterprises, businesses to use new technology, So Singapore is just one simple case. Now, I show you two of my clients here. On the left is Crown Coffee. They have a robotic barista that has done so well that even Japan's JRE, Japan Rail East, that manages the railway stations in Japan, they have signed a contract with Crown Coffee, which is my client, to use their robots. Yeah. Then another client is Tongluk, which is a very famous Chinese chain, public listed with a lot of Chinese restaurants. They bought a robotic arm from Japan to fry noodles and to fry vegetables, so that they don't have to employ so many workers, right? Another technological innovation will be, as we are aware, people are impatient, so they want to queue, or they want to have very short queues. So even McDonald's and many others use ordering machines, so that it's fast, right? So that everything is, the order has gone in and the customer has already paid. Yeah. Another two examples. Putian. If you come to Singapore, Putian is a very famous Chinese restaurant. The food they serve is from Fujian province, okay, near the sea. Putian has already expanded through franchising into China, Taiwan, Malaysia, and they are planning to go to many other countries, including Australia, right? And they even use a robotic, server, to take orders and to deliver dishes. So when you come to Singapore, please do visit them. It's quite interesting. Then Jamba is fruit juice. So they too are using a robotic, arm to serve smoothie through their kiosk. So actually, so again, you don't even need any person there. You can just order through the screen, and then the robotic arm will prepare your smoothie, and then you collect on your own. So technological innovation is very, very important. The next trend is about environment. Again, as I shared earlier on about ESG, which nowadays some banks even say, I won't lend you money unless you show me that you are looking at your carbon footprint, you're looking at how to protect the environment. So for example, here I've got two examples. One is this orange juice kiosk, whereby nobody is needed. So it's technology, but more importantly, the cup that contains the orange juice actually is made from the orange skin, or we call it the orange peel, the peel of the orange. So even if you were to throw the cup away, because it's made of the orange skin, it is very good for the environment. It's not like a paper cup that has got plastic in it that takes, some people say up to 200 years, for it to biodegrade. Okay, so you can see that now even paper cups, people are thinking of using, sea grass, seaweeds rather, and grass, and tapioca to make paper cups so that they are biodegradable. So it's very important. And another thing I want to share is even many cities now are members of livable cities. So like in Singapore, there's this Center for Livable Cities where they promote knowledge about how to reduce your carbon footprint and how to be more environmentally friendly. So modern consumer, especially young people, a lot of movement are led by young people about environment. So if you are perceived to be unfriendly to the environment, you may lose customers. So again, these are things that you need to be aware of. And I show some more other slides about all these things about the importance of protecting the environment. Another trend is gut-friendly food. So you can see from here kimchi. In fact, a lot of people are not aware that even in India, fermented food actually, they are very popular. So I'm sure even in Vietnam there are a lot of food that are preserved because. Like what our ancestors say, they are actually very good for our health. It's good for digestion, So even Coca-Cola, they have acquired a kombucha maker, tea, drinks that are very good for digestion, So you'll find that if you have food that is good for the body, good for digestion, good for health, is another trend. Then another very obvious trend is ghost kitchens. Some people call it cloud kitchens. Some people call it social kitchens. Some people call it shack kitchens, whatever. But the whole idea is that restaurants feel that they don't need to open brick and mortar, actual physical restaurants, in the whole city. Even so, if they want to serve more customers and the delivery doesn't have to take a long time, so they actually open up ghost kitchens, that just do delivery, and like I said, some brands actually come together and share a kitchen. They just make sure that they are advertisement through the social media is strong and that they are trustworthy, and so this is a good way to expand also, just basically through social media and good marketing. And of course, good reviews. If you can get key opinion leaders to talk about your food, even though you don't have restaurant in that area, this will be a good strategy. Even Nestle is such a huge company. They actually have this thing called Tiffin Labs, and then they collaborate with a lot of restaurants, to operate ghost kitchens in a sense, So Nestle is quite clever. So they are even promoting this to help their customers that buy a lot of their ingredients to gain more business, incremental revenue, right? Then another trend is no surprise in Asia, bubble tea. In Singapore, such a small country with just 5 million people, right? We have at least 100 bubble tea brands. Some of course didn't do so well, right? Some are so small, they are not so well known. But from Taiwan alone, already there are at least almost 40 brands, Then there are even Caucasians from Australia, they come up with bubble tea and try to franchise, okay? And of course in China, also they have bubble tea brands, And in Singapore, there are some local restaurateurs. For example, I show this on this slide. They also came up with their own brand, okay? So, instead of putting tapioca balls, they put mochi, mochi balls, just to be different, So this is another trend that is still happening, right? So I will not show some more trends because of time limit, okay? But I think what's very important is when you want to expand, when you want to go overseas, you must be very careful, whether that country, that you are going in has the market and whether, they want your kind of food. I show 2 examples here, all right, about basics. For example, Mary Brown. Mary Brown is actually a burger and fried chicken brand from Malaysia, okay? But they are very smart. They tell everybody that they are halal and they are the world's #1 biggest fried chicken franchise. And they target mainly Muslim countries. Like in China, they target Xinjiang, where there are a lot of Muslims. And they already opened more than 1 dozen outlets in Xinjiang, doing very well, And of course, they put in some words that look like Arabic words, right? So they know how to appeal to the locals, right? So whereas Mary Brown hasn't done well in Singapore, because Singaporeans say, oh, it's from Malaysia, maybe it's not so good. They prefer to go to KFC or they go to Four Fingers or they go to Popeyes, they think that those brands are stronger, right? So understanding your product, understanding the mentality of the local audience are important. Now, another important thing is, say, pricing. So like McDonald's, they have done very well in many countries. But when they went to Iceland, they actually failed. So I put this slide there, say why McDonald's failed in Iceland. So basically Iceland, actually people like McDonald's. They were able to show long queues for McDonald's. But why did McDonald's still fail? Because the franchisee couldn't make money. The franchisee had to import a lot of things from overseas and he had to sell the burgers at a very high price. So after a while, even at the high price, he couldn't make enough money to survive. So he had to close. So even though your food may be very popular, but the local environment, whether it is tariffs, whether it's the suppliers, whether it's the tax regime in the country, all those things may make the pricing of your food, too pricey, and then if you keep increasing your price, people will not eat. But if you don't increase, then you cannot cover, the cost of your ingredients and the rental and the labor, right? So what I'm trying to say is you must do your homework. You cannot go just because someone say, oh, there's a big market there. Oh, they like Vietnamese food. You actually have to come up with a financial model to make sure that, your franchisee, or if you open on your own, the financials make sense. Okay. And then I show you another example here, like In-N-Out. People who have been to America know that In-N-Out is very, very popular, right? Just like, Five Guys, and other Shake Shack and other so-called, gourmet burgers, the higher grade ones, right? But in and out, after they did 3 pop-up store in Singapore, they still haven't decided to come because they feel that they might not be able to open enough stores, to make the business viable. Okay, so they're still doing their sums. They're still trying to look for someone that can commit to open, at least 20 stores, maybe in 2 to 5 years time, right? So it's good. It's good to try the market to see whether people like your food or not, and to see whether you can get good locations or not, and whether your pricing is acceptable or not. Because their burgers, just like Five Guys and Shake Shack, are more expensive than, of course, McDonald's and Burger King, right? Another example I'll show you is, for example, Magnolia Bakery. I think those of you who have been to New York will know that Magnolia Bakery is a very famous cake shop, and they franchise. And they're quite smart because during this pandemic, a lot of people work from home, and so they decide to come up with lounge clothing that people can wear. Is very comfortable, and then they come up with bags that are very comfortable to carry and is environmentally friendly, and the response is very good. And people buy it as gifts and souvenirs, when they go to New York, because during this pandemic time, a lot of people, wear very casually, yet look very nice and very modern, and they participate in Zoom meetings, so they want to look nice, but they want to dress comfortably throughout the day, right? Then another thing I show you here is, like, because of the pandemic, right? A lot of people are stressed. Some are in depression. So KFC even did a campaign to encourage, this is in Australia, KFC Australia, to tell their customers, especially young people, that, oh, KFC, we have a youth foundation. We care about you. We care about your mental wellness. So all these little things are important to strengthen your brand. So even during a pandemic, even though you are selling food, you have to be active and keep your brand up. We call it top of mind, to make people remember you, right? And then, of course, when you go to another country, just be aware that there will be copycats like this one. In Thailand, people, if you look properly, then it's not Starbucks. But if from far, you might think that how come Starbucks is having a small store on the roadside, right? So if you don't protect your brand properly, a lot of people may just copy it, and just change a little bit here and there, just to write on your goodwill, right? So I know my 20 minutes is up. I welcome you to send me questions, through through the Restaurant Association of Vietnam, right? And then I'm more than happy to share more information with you. This slide is about my company. As you can see there, 33 years. We are the longest in the franchise consulting industry in Asia. We have done many projects. We have a big network. We are very active. We go to many shows. We publish the Asia Franchise and Business Opportunities magazine. And you can contact me through LinkedIn or Facebook, or you can email me. So with that, I thank you. And I hope to meet you in person in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Mr. Albert Kong for the exciting presentation. This is also the last session of the 2 days of the Asia Food and Beverage Summit and Food Tracks 2021. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn ông Albert Kong và phần trình bày rất là thú vị về và đây cũng là phiên cuối cùng của 2 ngày sự kiện Asia Food and Beverage Summit và Food Tracks 2021. Và đó là chúng ta đã trải qua 2 ngày thảo luận với 12 phần trình bày của các chuyên gia cùng các phiên thảo luận chuyên sâu về các chuyên đề về tương lai của ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực Việt Nam trong giai đoạn mới, về vận hành xuất sắc, chìa khóa vượt khủng hoảng, cũng như là tối ưu hóa lợi nhuận và phát triển bền vững. Doanh nghiệp, xã hội, Hiệp hội Nhà hàng Việt Nam với vai trò là đơn vị tiên phong trong thúc đẩy đổi mới sáng tạo, thúc đẩy phát triển hệ sinh thái kinh doanh bền vững ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực Việt Nam, cùng với Informal Markets và Hiệp hội Du lịch ẩm thực thế giới WFTA, cùng tất cả diễn giả của Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc đã mang đến nhiều thông tin, kinh nghiệm, bài học có giá trị và có khả năng áp dụng thực tiễn, giúp cho doanh nghiệp của mình vững vàng vượt qua thách thức và nguy cơ hiện tại. cũng như là vững tin vận dụng hiệu quả thời cơ để tồn tại và đặt nền móng cho doanh nghiệp phát triển bền vững trong giai đoạn mới với tư duy và công cụ của vận hành xuất sắc. Và để chính thức bế mạc chương trình, chúng tôi xin trân trọng một lần nữa kính mời ông Lê Tân, Tổng thư ký, Phó Chủ tịch Hiệp hội Văn hóa ẩm thực Việt Nam, cố vấn chương trình, sẽ có đôi lời chia sẻ để bế mạc. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông Lê Tân ạ.
Kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, kính thưa tất cả các bạn. Trước hết, cho phép tôi được thay mặt ban tổ chức gửi đến quý vị lời chúc mạnh khỏe, bình an và lời chào trân trọng nhất. Kính thưa quý vị, đại dịch Covid đã và đang cướp đi của nhân loại nói chung rất nhiều thứ, từ tinh thần, vật chất, thói quen, quan điểm cuộc sống và kinh doanh. Trong đó, Việt Nam của chúng ta cũng không hề ngoại lệ. Trong thời điểm nhạy cảm về dịch bệnh kéo theo sự đứt gãy chuỗi cung ứng thị trường, xã hội nói chung đang sống trong trạng thái luôn phòng thủ để đối phó với sự an toàn của cuộc sống. Tuy nhiên, với tinh thần và hào khí sẵn có của mỗi người, chúng ta, những doanh nhân, doanh nghiệp, hoạt động kinh doanh trong ngành FB không hề lùi bước. Chúng ta biến nguy thành cơ, biết vận dụng nội lực, tự thân vận động để tồn tại. Những thách thức và cơ hội vô cùng to lớn như vậy của ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực Việt Nam, trong 2 ngày qua, chúng ta đã hợp tác cùng nhau tổ chức thực hiện Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực năm 2021. Đồng hành với hội nghị đã có 22 nhà khoa học, nhà nghiên cứu, chuyên gia đầu ngành, có 6 đại biểu quốc tế và trên 350 người từ nhiều lĩnh vực như quản lý cao cấp, chủ doanh nghiệp, nhà đầu tư đã tham dự. Đến giờ phút này, tôi khẳng định Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực 2021 đã thành công tốt đẹp. Thay mặt ban tổ chức và với tư cách là người cố vấn cho hội nghị, tôi đánh giá cao giá trị học thuật, chất lượng nội dung hết sức thực dụng mà các học giả đã mang lại. Để hội nghị được diễn ra tốt đẹp như mong đợi, tôi cũng trân trọng ghi nhận các đơn vị đồng tổ chức, trong đó có Hiệp hội Du lịch Thế giới. Các bạn đã với tinh thần doanh nhân, tự tin, bình tĩnh, can đảm, sống chân với lũ và tìm cách lách qua khe cửa hẹp của dịch bệnh nhằm đổi mới sáng tạo hoạt động kinh doanh trong tình hình mới, đã đồng hành tâm huyết thực hiện một sự kiện mang tầm khu vực và quốc tế, mà trong đó có vai trò của nhà tổ chức chính thức, doanh nghiệp xã hội, Hiệp hội Nhà hàng Việt Nam rất đáng trân trọng. Tôi tin tưởng rằng với tinh thần cầu thị, biết lắng nghe đầu thấu hiểu của các bạn đã hoạt động kinh doanh trong ngành FB sẽ vận dụng các chiêu từng cơ hội nhỏ để mang lại hiệu quả lớn. Một lần nữa, kính chúc quý vị và gia đình bình an vượt qua đại dịch, hoạt động kinh doanh phát triển bền vững. Một lần nữa, xin thay mặt ban tổ chức xin được trân trọng cảm ơn, tạm biệt và xin hẹn gặp lại.
Dạ, vâng, một lần nữa xin cảm ơn ông Lê Tân về phần phát biểu bế mạc kết thúc 2 ngày sự kiện Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc. Và thay mặt cho ban tổ chức thì chúng tôi cũng xin chân thành cảm ơn tất cả các quý đối tác, các doanh nghiệp, các chuyên gia đã tham gia sự kiện Asia Food and Beverage Summit 2021 và Food Tracks Việt Nam với tên gọi là Hội nghị thượng đỉnh về vận hành xuất sắc trong ngành nhà hàng ẩm thực, được tổ chức bởi Doanh nghiệp Xã hội Hiệp hội Nhà hàng Việt Nam RAV, Hiệp hội Du lịch ẩm thực Thế giới WFTA và Informal Markets Việt Nam. Các đơn vị đồng phối hợp tổ chức gồm John & Partners, đơn vị cố vấn chuyên nghiệp về vận hành xuất sắc với vai trò Chủ tịch Hội đồng chuyên môn về vận hành xuất sắc từ tiến sĩ Ngô Công Trường, Theravade Travel, The Lotus HQA, Williams Business Agency, Phú Đạt Gia, với sự đồng hành từ Hiệp hội Văn hóa ẩm thực Việt Nam VCCA, đơn vị bảo trợ chuyên ngành, và sự hỗ trợ từ Tổng cục Du lịch, cùng sự đồng hành hỗ trợ từ rất nhiều các đơn vị tài trợ, hỗ trợ truyền thông, doanh nghiệp trong hệ sinh thái kinh doanh nhà hàng ẩm thực của Doanh nghiệp Xã hội Hiệp hội Nhà hàng ẩm thực Việt Nam như các đơn vị tài trợ hỗ trợ sự kiện, nhà tài trợ Kim Cương, trường cao đẳng khách sạn 5 sao quốc tế Imperial IISC, nhà tài trợ Bạch Kim, công ty trách nhiệm hữu hạn du lịch Việt An VN Travel, nhà tài trợ vàng, đơn vị sản xuất nội dung Việt Success, nhà tài trợ bạc, công ty cổ phần du lịch Thành Công TTC Hospitality, và các đơn vị hỗ trợ sự kiện như mạng du lịch nhà hàng khách sạn Việt Nam, Vietnam Hospitality Network VHN, công ty trách nhiệm hữu hạn phần mềm và truyền thông Vân Tây Media, Hightech Global, công ty cổ phần quốc tế ABC Plus, Bách Việt F&B Center, công ty trách nhiệm hữu hạn F&B Director, công ty đào tạo ẩm thực Hoàng Mỹ, Hội siêu đầu bếp thế giới tại Việt Nam WAMCVN, Trung tâm ươm tạo khởi nghiệp Sông Hàn Incubator, công ty cổ phần New Retail Technology Kaipass, cổng kết nối cộng đồng doanh nghiệp Connecting Plus, chi nhánh công ty cổ phần truyền thông Hoa và Lê, Travel Life Magazine, công ty trách nhiệm hữu hạn phong cách mộc PCM, The Mechanic Eatery Bar, Digital Connect, Vietnam Hospitality Hub. Và chúng tôi cũng mong chờ sự tham gia của tất cả quý vị doanh nghiệp trong chuỗi hoạt động hàng tháng từ Doanh nghiệp Xã hội Hiệp hội Nhà hàng Việt Nam bằng cách theo dõi fanpage Restaurant Association of Vietnam RAV và website rav.vn để được thông báo và tham gia chuỗi các hoạt động liên tục hàng tháng từ RAV. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn và xin kính chào và hẹn gặp lại tất cả quý vị trong những lần sắp tới. Xin chào.